Howdy folks. You're watching Harryverse X. Sit tight because today we bring you Vampire King Alucard adopts neglected Harry and trains him as ultimate no-life king with ancient powers. Smash that like, subscribe, and enjoy the ride. Chapter 1, The Boy Under the Stairs. The garden at number 4, Privet Drive was the kind of perfectly maintained that said more about the people inside the house than any conversation could. Every hedge was cut to the same height. Every flower was the same color. The lawn was edged with a ruler's precision, and the garden gnomes, ceramic, not real, stood at mathematically equal distances from one another along the front path. It was a garden that had never once been played in. Alucard noticed this the moment he materialized on the pavement outside. He stood there for a moment in the dark, hands in the pockets of his ridiculous red coat, hat pulled low, orange lenses catching the amber of the street lamp. It was 2:30 in the morning. Every house on the street was dark. Every house looked exactly like the one beside it. He'd walked through the ruins of Constantinople. He'd watched the Austro-Hungarian Empire collapse under its own ceremonial weight. He'd stood in the ashes of things that had believed themselves permanent. And somehow, standing outside this particular house on this particular English street, he felt something close to contempt. He wasn't supposed to be here. Integra hadn't sent him anywhere. There were no ghouls in Surrey, no rogue vampires terrorizing the commuter belt, nothing that required the attention of the Hellsing Organization's most singular weapon. He was here because 3 nights ago, sitting in the dark of his basement chambers, he had felt something. Not heard. Not seen. Felt. A pull, the way you feel the tide change before you see the water move. Something old, something that resonated with a frequency he recognized from the deepest parts of himself, the parts that had existed before the Ottoman court, before the chains, before the name Alucard was given to him like a collar made of syllables. He had followed it the way he followed most things that interested him. Without hesitation and without asking permission. The feeling was coming from inside number 4. Alucard tilted his head and looked at the house properly, the way he looked at things when he stopped performing disinterest and actually paid attention. His eyes moved past the double-glazed windows, past the patterned net curtains, past the faint blue light of a television that someone had left on in the living room. Past all of that, into the architecture of the thing, the rooms, the space, the way human habitation left its emotional fingerprints on every surface it touched over time. The upstairs rooms felt saturated. A large master bedroom with anxiety running through it like damp. A second bedroom that had been lived in so thoroughly its walls had practically absorbed a child's entire personality, possessive, loud, certain of its own centrality. A third bedroom that felt recently converted, boxes still stacked against one wall, the ghost of office furniture still impressed in the carpet. And underneath the stairs. A cupboard. Alucard was very still for a moment. Then he walked up the path, tried the front door, found it locked, and walked through it anyway. The interior of number 4 Privet Drive at 2:30 in the morning was exactly what it looked like from outside. Aggressively normal. The hallway smelled of air freshener and fabric softener and something underneath both of those things that was harder to name, a kind of tension that had been present so long it had become structural, like load-bearing anxiety. Family photographs lined the staircase wall. A large, pink-faced man. A thin, horse-faced woman. A boy who took after his father in every way that suggested the father hadn't been a particularly good template. No photographs of anyone else. Alucard looked at the cupboard door under the stairs. It had a latch on the outside. A lock on the outside, small and cheap and absolute in its statement of intent. He crouched down and looked at the door for a long moment, his coat pooling on the floor around him. Then he opened it. The space inside was approximately 4 feet by 5. There was a cot in it, the collapsible kind you bought for visiting relatives. A thin blanket. A pillow with no pillowcase. A small wooden shelf hammered unevenly into the wall, with 3 books stacked on it and a stub of candle in a holder. Drawings on the inside of the door, small, detailed drawings done in pencil, animals and trees and a figure that might have been a person flying on something. And in the cot, a boy. 7 years old, small for his age, black hair going in approximately 11 different directions. Wearing an overlarge t-shirt and shorts that had clearly belonged to someone twice his size. Round glasses on the shelf beside the candle, one arm repaired with tape. The boy was asleep, curled on his side with his knees pulled up, one hand loosely fisted near his face. A scar on his forehead in the shape of a lightning bolt, silvered over with age. Alucard sat back on his heels and looked at the child for a long time. He could feel it clearly now. Not magic, he'd been around wizards, knew what their power felt like, that warm bright complicated thing they all carried. This was something different. Something underneath the magic, deeper than it, older than the categories the wizarding world had invented to describe supernatural power. It was coiled in the boy's chest like a sleeping thing, enormous and patient and utterly unaware of itself. A soul architecture he'd seen exactly once before. In a mirror, for centuries ago. Alucard said quietly. The boy's eyes opened. They were green. Shockingly, startlingly green, the kind of color that felt intentional. They found him immediately, no confusion, no squinting for glasses, just instant focus, and they didn't look afraid. They looked evaluating. Harry Potter looked at the enormous figure crouching in the doorway of his cupboard with the calm assessment of a child who had learned early that fear was only useful if it helped you do something, and that most of the time it didn't. He looked at the red coat, the hat, the orange glasses. He looked at the gloved hands. He looked at the smile, which was, admittedly, a lot of teeth. "You're not Uncle Vernon," he said. "No," Alucard agreed. "You're not one of the neighbors either." "Also no." Harry sat up slowly and reached for his glasses. Put them on. Looked at Alucard with the slightly clearer gaze of someone who could now see properly. This did not appear to change his assessment significantly. "What are you, then?" he asked. Alucard considered the question. Most people, when confronted with him in enclosed spaces at 2 a.m, did not respond with philosophical inquiry. "What do you think I am?" Harry thought about it with apparent seriousness. "Something that doesn't need to use the door," he said. "I heard you open it but I didn't hear you come in the house." "So you were already in it." A pause. "Also you look wrong." "Wrong how?" "Like a picture of a person rather than a person." He tilted his head. "Are you a ghost?" "Not even slightly." "Then what?" "A vampire," Alucard said, watching the boy's face for the reaction. Harry considered this the same way he'd considered everything else. Without the performed shock that would have been, under the circumstances, quite reasonable. "Do you eat people?" "I drink blood." "It's a meaningful distinction." "Whose blood?" "People who deserve it, mostly." Harry absorbed this. "Okay," he said, in the tone of a child filing information under interesting but not immediately actionable. "Then, why are you in my cupboard?" "Because you're sleeping in it," Alucard said. "Which raises certain questions about the people who put you there." Something crossed Harry's face, fast and controlled, a flicker of something that a less observant person would have missed entirely. Not embarrassment. Closer to the particular exhaustion of someone who has explained a humiliation so many times it has stopped feeling like it belongs to them. "It's fine," Harry said. "Is it?" "I've got a candle. And books." "What are the books?" Harry glanced at the shelf. A biology textbook. It was being thrown out at school. And 2 library books about animals. He paused. "I like animals." Alucard looked at the drawings on the inside of the door. The flying figure, he realized, wasn't riding something. It was just flying. On its own. "Do you know what you are?" he asked. Harry blinked. "What do you mean?" "You have a mark on your forehead. You survived something that kills people. You are, whether you know it or not, quite famous in certain circles." "I'm not famous," Harry said flatly. I'm nobody. Aunt Petunia says, your aunt, Alucard said, with a pleasantness that was doing a great deal of work, is not a reliable narrator. He looked at the boy steadily. You're a wizard, Harry Potter. You likely already knew that. Children with your kind of power tend to notice things happening around them they can't explain. But that's not what I meant. Harry had gone very still. Not tense, still, the way a cat goes still when it's listening to something outside its usual frequency. What did you mean? I meant that underneath the magic, in the part of you that's older than any of it, there's something sleeping. Alucard tapped his own chest, over where a heart had once beaten. Something I recognize. What is it? I don't know yet, Alucard said. I intend to find out. He stood up, and in the narrow hallway he was an extraordinary amount of person, tall and dark and crackling with something that pushed against the walls of the small, normal house like it was offended by them. I am going to offer you something, and I want you to understand that I do not make this offer again, and I do not make it lightly. Harry looked up at him with those green eyes. Come with me, Alucard said. I will teach you what you are. I will teach you what you can do. I won't pretend what I'm offering is safe, because it is not. But it is real, and it is yours, and no one will ever lock you in a cupboard again. The silence in the hallway stretched out. What about school? Harry asked. Alucard almost laughed. You'll have better teachers. What about my relatives? What about them? Harry looked at him for a long moment. Something moved through the green eyes, not quite calculation, not quite emotion. Something that combined both, that lived in the country between making a decision and making a commitment. Will you teach me to fly? He said. Like in my drawing. Alucard looked at the door, at the pencil sketch figure soaring over pencil sketch trees. Eventually, he said. Yes. Okay, Harry said, and got up off the cot. He didn't take much. The 3 books. The glasses case from the shelf. He pulled on a pair of socks and trainers that were a size too big, moving quietly with the practiced ease of someone who had long since memorized which floorboards creaked. He didn't look back at the cot, at the thin blanket, at the shelf with its candle stub. He walked to the front door, unlatched it himself, he clearly knew which lock it was, and stepped outside into the Surrey night. Alucard watched him go and then followed. He thought about leaving a note, or leaving something, some acknowledgement that the child was gone. He thought about this for approximately 3 seconds and then decided against it on the grounds that he didn't particularly care if the Dursleys were confused. They had put a child in a cupboard. Their confusion was, in the grand moral accounting, a minor tax. He caught up to Harry on the pavement. The boy was standing under the street lamp with his 3 books tucked under one arm, looking up and down the street with the air of someone taking stock of a situation. Where are we going? Harry asked. London. Briefly. Then further north. How are we getting there? Alucard considered the child, who was small and had no luggage and was 7 years old and seemed entirely unafraid of him. Have you ever had the experience of moving very quickly through shadow? No. Would you like to? Harry looked at the darkness at the end of the street where the last street lamp didn't reach, and then back at Alucard. Yes, he said. Hold your books tightly, Alucard said, and the shadow at the end of the road came alive. The thing about moving through shadows, when you had never done it before, was the cold. Not the cold of winter or the cold of water, the cold of absence, the cold of all the spaces between light where warmth had never bothered to go. Harry didn't cry out when it hit him. His whole body seized up for a moment, locked with sensation, and then he pushed through it on sheer stubbornness, which told Alucard something. They came out in the Hellsing Organization's London offices, a building that looked from the outside like a solicitor's firm and felt on the inside like the decision-making center of a small but extremely focused private army. Harry stumbled only slightly on the landing, steadied himself, pushed his glasses up his nose. Looked around the wood-paneled corridor with the antique weapons on the walls and the very serious portraits and the two armed guards who had immediately raised their weapons and then lowered them upon recognizing Alucard. Harry said. This is the Hellsing Organization, Alucard said. They concern themselves with supernatural threats to the British Isles. Like vampires. Among other things. But you work for them. It's a complicated arrangement. And you brought me here. Briefly. We're going to the manor. He looked at the boy. Are you hungry? Harry said nothing, which was itself an answer. Alucard turned to the nearer guard, a young man called Morrison who was adequately professional and adequately frightened of Alucard, a useful combination. Get him something to eat. Sir, he's a child, Morrison. He needs food. Prioritize this over whatever expression you're about to make. Morrison prioritized it. Harry sat in the corridor on a very old wooden chair and ate sandwiches that someone found in the office kitchen with the focused, methodical intensity of someone for whom meals were not guaranteed. He didn't scarf them down or look embarrassed about eating. He ate efficiently and thoroughly and drank the glass of water he was given to the last drop. Alucard watched him with an expression his face didn't usually produce, something that might, on a face with less history, have been called concern. How long has the cupboard been where you sleep? He asked. Always, Harry said, without looking up from the sandwich. And before that? I don't remember a before that. Alucard filed this information in the part of himself that remembered which specific varieties of human behavior were worth responding to and in what order. He would deal with it, as he dealt with most things, methodically and without particular hurry, because hurry was the style of people who were afraid of running out of time, and he was not. Who told you you were nobody? He said. Harry set down the sandwich and looked at him. Aunt Petunia. And Dudley, that's my cousin. And teachers sometimes, when Dudley told them things. A pause. And Uncle Vernon, but he mostly just shouted. Did you believe them? The green eyes were thoughtful. I believed the part where they didn't want me, Harry said, with a 7-year-old's precise and devastating clarity. I didn't believe the part where that made it my fault. Alucard was quiet for a moment. Good, he said. By the time they reached Hellsing Manor, a vast, dark, Jacobean building in the English countryside that had the architectural profile of a place that had survived several sieges and a couple of civil wars, it was nearly 4 a.m. The grounds were lit by the kind of security lighting that was specifically not for the benefit of the dark and spoke to the presence of people who were very serious about their perimeter. Harry stood in the gravel drive and looked up at the building. It's big, he said. Yes. Do you live here? In the basement. Because you're a vampire. Because I prefer it. Can I see the basement? Eventually. Alucard pushed open the front door, which opened before he touched it, which Harry noted. First you're going to sleep somewhere that isn't a cupboard. Then we're going to have a conversation with the woman who runs this organization. Then we will work out what comes next. Is she going to be angry? Harry asked. He said it practically, not anxiously, the question of a strategist, not a child worrying about punishment. Certainly, Alucard said. Don't concern yourself with it. Should I be polite? Be honest. She respects that more than politeness. Harry considered this. Okay. He walked into Hellsing Manor with his 3 books under his arm and his 2 big trainers leaving small prints on the stone floor, and Alucard walked behind him, and the building seemed to take a long breath around them both. Integra Hellsing was awake when they arrived because Integra Hellsing was almost always awake. She ran on 4 hours of sleep and an iron sense of purpose and the kind of tea that was less a beverage than a statement of intent. She was in her study when Alucard actually knocked, which meant he was announcing something rather than simply appearing, which was a warning sign she recognized. Come in, she said, and took off her glasses. Alucard opened the door and stood to one side. Harry Potter walked in. Integra looked at the child. The child looked at Integra. Integra was a tall, pale, blonde woman with wire-rimmed glasses and the posture of someone who had been taught to take up exactly as much space as she intended and not a millimeter more. She was wearing a white dress shirt and trousers at 4 in the morning because she kept herself to a standard. She had a lit cigar between 2 fingers. She looked at the boy for a long moment. Then she looked at Alucard. "Explain," she said. "Harry Potter," Alucard said. "The child who survived the killing curse at 1 year old. Currently residing in a domestic dwelling in Surrey that I will generously describe as unsuitable. I found him sleeping in a storage cupboard. He is 7. "I am aware of who Harry Potter is," Integra said, with restraint. "Why is he in my study?" "Because of what he is." Something shifted in Integra's expression. Not softening, Integra Hellsing did not visibly soften. But a shift in register, from controlled irritation to controlled attention. "What is he?" "I don't have a complete answer yet. But the foundation is familiar." He looked at Harry. "Show her your arm." Harry looked at him. "Why?" "Just the inside of your wrist. Hold it up in the light." Harry, who had decided somewhere between Surrey and here that this strange vampire person seemed to mean what he said, pushed up his sleeve and held out his arm. Integra stood, moved to the desk lamp, and looked. Under the skin, in the light, there was something, not visible, exactly perceivable. A faint darkness running along the veins, not the dark of illness but the dark of depth, the same quality you got looking down into very deep water, the sense of something vast going further than the light could follow. Integra stood back. Looked at Alucard. "How old did you say he is?" she said. 7. "And it's already present, yes. Which is why I found him." It announced itself. Alucard's smile was the particular smile he wore when he was genuinely interested in something. "I haven't felt that signature since, I know when you felt it," Integra said. She turned and looked at Harry. The boy had pulled his sleeve back down and was waiting with patient green attention. "You're Harry Potter," she said. "Yes," Harry said. "Do you know what a no-life king is?" "No." "Do you know what you survived when you were 1 year old?" "A curse," Harry said. "A very bad one. Alucard told me about the scar." "Alucard told you?" Integra looked at the vampire. Something passed between them that was less a look than a brief treaty negotiation. Then she looked back at Harry. "Are you frightened?" "No," Harry said. "Of anything? The travel? This house? Him?" Harry looked at Alucard briefly, with the assessing expression he'd worn in the cupboard. "He's strange," he said. "But he came to find me on purpose, which most people don't. And he gave me sandwiches." He returned his gaze to Integra. "And you asked if I was frightened instead of telling me I should be. Which is different." Integra was quiet for 2 full seconds. Then she did something she didn't do often, she told the truth when an evasion would have served. "You'll stay here," she said. "You'll be given a room. Tomorrow," she checked the clock on her desk, "in a few hours, you'll meet Walter, who manages this household and several other things. He will establish some basic routines for you. And then," she looked at Alucard, "we will have a much longer conversation about what all of this means." "Okay," Harry said. "Go with Morrison." She pressed a button on her desk. "He'll show you to a room." Harry moved to follow Morrison, who had reappeared in the doorway, and then stopped. Turned back. "Thank you," he said to Integra. "For not calling anyone." He paused. "You could have called someone to take me back. You didn't." Integra held his gaze. "No," she said. "I didn't." Harry nodded once, with an odd formality for a 7-year-old, and followed Morrison out. The door closed. Integra stood in the silence of her study and then turned slowly to look at Alucard, who was leaning in the corner with his arms crossed and an expression she recognized as his version of something dangerous brewing just below the surface of his composure. "A no-life king," she said. "In potential," Alucard said. "Still dormant. Still entirely human in every functional sense. What happened to him? What was the situation? Cupboard under the stairs. Malnourished, not severely but chronically. Clearly used to being decorative in his absence, if you understand me. Present in the house but not acknowledged as part of it." Integra made a sound that was not quite a word. "The wizarding world," Alucard continued, "has him classified as a protected asset. A savior figure. They've built an entire cultural infrastructure around his destiny. His headmaster, Dumbledore, you know the name, I know the name. Placed him with those people deliberately. Specifically chose them." A pause that contained several centuries of Alucard's particular brand of judgment. "I intend to have words with him eventually." "You intend to keep the child," Integra said. It was not a question. "He needs training. Real training. Not the wizarding curriculum, not the watered-down approach they take with a student, actual instruction in what he is and what that means." "And what is he, Alucard?" "Precisely." Alucard was quiet for a moment. "He has the same soul architecture I had when I was turned," he said. "The latent foundation that made my transformation produce what I am rather than what most vampires become. It's extraordinarily rare, in my 400 years since the transformation, I haven't encountered it once." He turned his orange gaze to the window, to the dark outside. "He's a potential no-life king, Integra. If that potential is cultivated rather than suppressed, if he develops correctly rather than being squeezed into whatever shape Dumbledore's designed for him, what he becomes will be something the world hasn't seen before. And if it isn't cultivated? If he goes back, the potential will either atrophy or erupt," Alucard said. "Atrophy means a wizard with unusual power and no understanding of its depth. Eruption," he made a gesture that managed to be casual and comprehensive at once, "would be problematic for Surrey." Integra sat back down at her desk. Lit her cigar. Thought. "He'll need education," she said. "Beyond whatever you'll teach him. Actual schooling, he's 7 years old." "Walter," Alucard said. "Walter has enough to," she stopped. "Fine. Walter." She looked at the door. "He thanked me," she said, almost to herself. "Yes. For not calling someone." She inhaled on the cigar. "He was checking whether I would." "He tests people," Alucard said. "He's been testing me since the cupboard. Checking whether I'll do what I say. Whether what I offer is real." "And will you?" She looked at him directly. "Do what you say." Alucard smiled. It was his real smile this time, not the performed one, wider, older, with something in it that was simultaneously frightening and completely sincere. "I recognize my own soul in a 7-year-old child sleeping in a cupboard under a staircase," he said. "The least I can do is not put him back." Harry's room was on the second floor, east wing. It was large. It had actual furniture, a real bed, with a proper frame and an actual duvet, and a desk, and a lamp, and a wardrobe whose door opened and closed like a door rather than a latch. The window looked out over the grounds, where the security lights made islands of visibility in the dark. Morrison showed him the bathroom, adjacent, private, another thing that was apparently just his, and said there were spare clothes in the wardrobe, that breakfast would be whenever he wanted it in the morning, that someone called Walter would come by at 9. Then Morrison left. Harry stood in the middle of the room for a long time. He went to the window and looked out. He could see the gravel drive, the edge of the tree line, the sky beginning to consider, very distantly, the possibility of dawn. He could feel the size of the house around him, not threatening, just present, the way large old things were present, substantial in their existence the way his cupboard had never been. He set his 3 books on the desk. Took off his glasses and put them on the bedside table. sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress was firm and real and had a clean smell that wasn't air freshener, just fabric, just clean. The pillow had a pillowcase. Harry Potter lay down in the first proper bed he'd ever slept in, under a duvet that weighed exactly right, and looked at the ceiling. He thought about Alucard, who had opened the cupboard and crouched down and asked him what he thought rather than telling him what to think. Who had said come with me like it was an invitation rather than an order. Who had, he noticed, not once told him he should be grateful or behave or be quiet. He thought about the pull he'd felt in his chest when Alucard smiled, not fear, though the smile was genuinely alarming. Something more like recognition. Like two lodestones in proximity suddenly becoming aware of each other's direction. He thought about the woman, Integra, with her straight back and her serious eyes and the way she'd asked "Are you frightened?" like the answer actually mattered to her. He thought about the darkness he'd felt when they moved through the shadows, the cold, the absence, the vast depth of it. He'd been afraid for exactly 1 second, and then he'd felt something else, something underneath the fear, "This belongs to me too." He fell asleep thinking about that. Outside the window, in the first gray edge of morning, a figure in a red coat stood on the gravel drive and looked up at the lit window until the light went off. Then Alucard turned and walked back into the house, through the door, through the floor, through the dark. Something had shifted tonight, in the accounting of the world, quiet and irreversible as a tide change. He wasn't displeased. Chapter 2, What the Dark Teaches. 3 months at Hellsing Manor changed Harry Potter the way rivers change stone, not all at once, not visibly day to day, but continuously, and without apology. Walter C. Dornez came to his room at 9 on the first morning as promised, knocked precisely twice, and when Harry opened the door found a tall, thin man in his 60s with silver hair and the kind of posture that made you want to straighten yours. He was wearing a full butler's uniform. He was carrying a breakfast tray with both hands and managing somehow to communicate complete authority while doing it. He looked at Harry. Harry looked at him. "You'll want to eat first," Walter said. "We'll discuss the day's structure after." He set the tray on the desk. Eggs, toast, orange juice, a small pot of tea. Real food, presented as though Harry's eating it was simply expected rather than a conditional gift. Harry ate while Walter stood by the window and described, in clear and unflowery terms, what Harry's days at the manor would look like going forward. Mornings were academics. History, real history, not the sanitized version taught in primary schools, but the version that included the parts governments preferred people not know about. Mathematics, because Walter considered mathematical thinking the foundation of everything else. Reading and writing, because Harry was already ahead of his age group but had gaps that needed filling. And languages, starting with Latin, because according to Walter, Latin was the skeleton inside half of English and most of magic, and understanding skeletons was useful. Afternoons were physical. Not PE in the recreational sense, discipline. Balance, movement, conditioning. How to fall without being hurt. How to be still. How to read a room when you walked into it. Evenings were Alucard's territory, and Walter's expression when he said this communicated that he had opinions about this arrangement which he was professionally choosing not to share. "And you?" Harry asked. "Are you training me too, or just teaching?" Walter smiled. It was a quiet smile, but it reached his eyes. "Both," he said. "In different ways." Harry finished his eggs and said, "Okay," and they began. The first week, Harry learned that Walter Dornez was the most precise human being he had ever met. Every lesson had a structure, and the structure was never arbitrary, it was engineered, piece fitting into piece the way watch components fit, so that by the end of the day you'd learned 4 things and they all connected to each other in a way you hadn't seen coming at the beginning. He taught Harry Latin not with a textbook but with inscriptions, photographs of real inscriptions from Roman walls and medieval manuscripts, so that the language arrived attached to something that had existed, that had been cut into stone by an actual person with an actual chisel. Harry found he liked this. He'd always been good at finding the shape of things. He taught Harry mathematics with games first, Not childish games but puzzle games, pattern games, the kind that made your brain work in a particular direction without telling it to. By the end of the week Harry was doing arithmetic that was 2 school years ahead of where he'd been, not because Walter had drilled him but because the puzzles had made the concepts feel inevitable. The physical training was different. Walter did not train Harry himself, he supervised, corrected, and explained. The actual physical work was structured by a Hellsing operative named Chen, who was small and fast and entirely unimpressed by anything, and who made Harry run, and balance, and fall, and get up, and fall again, until falling became something his body processed rather than feared. "Why do I need to know how to fall?" Harry asked on the 3rd day, sitting on the mat with a bruised elbow. "Because everything that can stand up can be knocked down," Chen said. "The question is what happens next." Harry absorbed this and got up. The evenings were the thing, though. The evenings were Alucard. Alucard's approach to instruction was the opposite of Walter's in almost every surface way, and Harry took a while to understand that it was the same in every way that mattered. He didn't have a curriculum. He didn't have a schedule. He appeared when he appeared, which was usually after dark, usually in places Harry wasn't expecting, the library, the East Corridor, once sitting on the roof of the East Wing when Harry went up there to look at the stars. He never explained what he was going to teach before he taught it, and he never taught the same thing twice using the same method. What he did, Harry gradually understood, was observe. And then respond to what he observed. "What do you feel right now?" he asked Harry on the 2nd evening, appearing beside him in the corridor without sound. Harry had stopped flinching at this by day 3. Harry considered. "The floor through my socks. The draft from the window at the end of the hall. You, about 2 feet to my left. You felt me before you heard me," Alucard said. "I always do." "How?" Harry frowned. "Like a pressure change. Like when you open a big door in a storm and the air in the room shifts." He glanced at Alucard. "Is that normal?" "For you," Alucard said, "it is." He walked away without explaining further, and Harry stood in the corridor and thought about pressure changes and what they meant, and by morning he had started paying attention to the feeling around every person in the manor, cataloguing the way they felt before they arrived, the particular signature of each of them. Walter felt like controlled tension, like a compressed spring. Chen felt like kinetic energy at rest. Integra felt like a closed door that you understood, instinctively, was not to be tested. Alucard felt like standing at the edge of something that had no visible bottom. He told Alucard this the following evening. Alucard's smile was satisfied in a way Harry was learning to read as genuine. "Good," Alucard said. "Now stop using your ears for 10 minutes and tell me who else is in this house." Harry did it. It took 8 minutes, not 10. There were 17 people in the building. He could feel every one of them. The thing about Harry's power, which Alucard approached obliquely, from multiple directions, refusing to name it too early the way you refuse to name an animal you're trying not to spook, was that it was not dormant in the way power is dormant when it simply hasn't been used yet. It was dormant in the way a volcano is dormant, which is to say it was not dormant at all, it was merely not yet in motion. Alucard explained none of this to Harry. He simply kept tilting the angles until things showed themselves. 2 months in, he found Harry in the library at midnight. Harry had been unable to sleep, which happened sometimes, not anxiety, just a body that had started recalibrating itself to different rhythms, waking at odd hours, finding the dark more comfortable than the light. He was reading a book on the history of the Ottoman Empire that he'd pulled from the shelf because he'd seen it there and, given who was teaching him, had assumed it was relevant. He'd been right. There were margin notes in the book in a handwriting he recognized. "You were there," he said when Alucard materialized in the armchair across from him. "For parts of it," Alucard said. "Were you a vampire then?" "Yes." "What was it like?" Alucard looked at him for a moment. "Loud," he said. "Everything was loud, the battles, the politics, the dying. History sounds very clean afterward. In the moment it mostly sounds like a great deal of people shouting and metal hitting other metal. Harry thought about this. Walter says history is important because it tells you what humans do when they're afraid. Walter is correct. He also says you're the best and worst primary source he's ever had access to, and that you're insufferably vague when you're being directly asked something. Alucard actually laughed, a real one, short and genuine. Also correct. Harry looked down at the margin notes. You were imprisoned, he said. At some point. Before you were here. Yes. By a vampire hunter. By the Hellsing family. Integra's ancestor. He paused. Though, prisoner, is a complicated word for the arrangement. Walter said the chains you wore were more like an agreement. That you could have broken them at any point. Walter says a great deal for a man who values precision. Could you have broken them? Alucard was quiet for a moment, looking at Harry with an expression that was thoughtful in the way old things were thoughtful, not calculating, but genuinely considering. Yes, he said. But I was interested in what the constraint produced. What I became inside it. A pause. Limits are useful, Harry. Not because they define you. Because they reveal you. Harry turned this over. Is that why you don't just show me everything at once? About what I am? Partly. What's the other part? You're 7 years old. I'm nearly 8. An enormous difference, Alucard said, completely straight, and Harry threw a bookmark at him. The first real manifestation happened on a Tuesday in October, 6 weeks into Harry's time at the manor, and it announced itself the way these things always do, completely without warning and at the worst possible moment. Harry was in the training room with Chen. They were working on a specific exercise. Chen would move, Harry would respond, the aim being to develop instinctive physical reaction rather than planned response. Harry was good at this now, better than Chen had expected, quick and low and already reading the momentum before the movement fully committed. Then Chen got lucky with a feint and swept Harry's legs and Harry hit the mat hard, and something about the impact, the shock of it, the sharp bright flash of pain in his hip, connected with something deeper, something that had been building for 6 weeks of late nights and pressure changes and Alucard asking questions that pushed at the edges of what Harry thought he was. The lights in the training room went out. Not a power failure. The bulbs, which were behind protective casing, didn't blow, they simply ceased to emit light, as though the concept of illumination had been locally suspended. The room went completely black, and in the black there was a sound like a very deep breath being drawn in, and the temperature dropped 8 degrees in under a second, and Chen, who was a professional who had faced actual vampires and ghouls and creatures with no classification, pressed herself flat against the far wall. Harry was kneeling in the center of the room where he'd gotten up from the mat, and around him the darkness was doing something. Moving. Not randomly, flowing toward him, collecting around him the way iron filings flow toward a magnet, purposeful and involuntary. His eyes were wide and glowing faintly green, which was not something eyes were supposed to do. The darkness concentrated. It reached critical mass. It exploded outward. Not violently, not the explosion of destruction but the explosion of release, a wave of cold dark pressure that rolled outward from Harry in a perfect circle, hit every wall simultaneously, and rebounded into nothing. The lights came back on. The temperature went back up. The room was exactly as it had been. Harry was still kneeling on the mat, breathing hard, both hands pressed flat against the floor. He looked up at Chen. I didn't do that on purpose, he said. Chen peeled herself off the wall. Her voice was admirably steady. I noticed, she said. Alucard was in the room before Harry had fully gotten to his feet, which meant he'd been close, waiting, possibly, for exactly this. He said nothing. He crouched in front of Harry and looked at him with the direct, evaluating gaze he used when he was reading something properly. Hurt, he said. My hip, Harry said. From the fall. Not from the other thing. The other thing didn't hurt. It felt like, Harry tried to find the right word. Like holding your breath for a very long time and then being able to breathe. Except the breath was dark. Yes. Alucard nodded slowly. Stood up. Looked at the room, at the walls where the paint had developed a faint frost pattern that was already melting, at the training mat which had been pushed 3 inches along the floor by the wave. Good, he said. Good. Chen said, from her wall. It happened without a trigger event, Alucard said. No emotional extremity, no life-threatening stimulus. Pure accumulated pressure finding release. Which means the capacity is already self-generating. He looked at Harry. You know what you did? I pulled the dark in, Harry said. And then it came back out. You didn't pull it. It came to you. There's a distinction. He put a hand on Harry's shoulder, briefly, a contact he didn't use often enough for Harry to take for granted. We work on this now. Tonight. The training schedule adjusts. Adjusts how? Harry asked. You start learning to breathe, Alucard said, in a tone that made it clear he meant nothing as simple as oxygen. Walter appeared in the training room door, surveyed the frost patterns and the displaced Matt and Chen's expression, and said, "Ah," with the cadence of a man confirming a suspicion. You knew that was going to happen, Harry said. I suspected it would happen, Walter said. There's a meaningful distinction. You sound like him. Walter looked at Alucard. Alucard said nothing. I'll take that as a compliment in the spirit I choose, Walter said, and went to find Integra. Integra's response to the training room incident was to convene what she called a briefing, which meant Harry and Alucard and Walter sat in the main hall while Integra stood at one end of the table and went through the implications of what had happened in the manner of a general going through tactical options after an unexpected engagement. She was not panicked. She was not sentimental. She was precise. The supernatural community will have felt that, she said. Not precisely, it would read as a signature distortion, not a clear identification. But it will have registered. For who specifically? Alucard said. Anyone sensitive enough. Vampires above a certain age. Certain wizards with particular gift sets. She looked at Harry. Dumbledore, almost certainly. Harry's expression didn't change. Will he come here? He'll make inquiries first. He's cautious. Integra looked at Alucard. How long before you can get the boy to the point where he can contain it willingly? He doesn't need to contain it, Alucard said. He needs to direct it. How long? A pause. He's ahead of where I expected after 6 weeks. 3 months, possibly less, before the active power is stable enough to be deliberate rather than incidental. He looked at Harry. Provided the student applies himself. I apply myself, Harry said. You apply yourself to the parts you find interesting and coast on instinct through the parts you find dull, Alucard said, without heat. Which is not the same thing. Harry considered arguing and decided against it on the grounds that it was accurate. What parts do I find dull? Stillness, Walter said. Stillness, Alucard confirmed. I'm not dull at stillness. Last week, Walter said, during the focus exercise, you lasted 4 minutes before repositioning yourself 11 times. I was uncomfortable. Yes, Walter said. That was the exercise. Harry made a face. Integra, who had been watching this exchange with the focused attention she brought to everything, said, the stillness training doubles. Starting tomorrow. Harry looked at her. You're going to make me sit still for longer because I moved too much. I'm going to make you sit still for longer because the power you have can be felt from a significant distance when it isn't controlled, and the last thing we need is every supernatural entity in Britain showing up at my gates because a child can't maintain composure during meditation. She looked at him steadily. This is not punishment. This is strategy. Harry held her gaze for a moment. Then he nodded. Okay. Integra looked at him for just a second longer than necessary. Then she looked at Walter. See to it. The stillness training was exactly as uncomfortable as Harry had anticipated. Walter sat with him in the study every morning for an hour, both of them silent, Harry required to do nothing but exist in the room without fidgeting, repositioning, or demonstrating in any physical way that he was finding this difficult. The first few sessions were an exercise in quiet suffering. Harry sat. He moved. Walter noted it without comment. Harry sat again. He became aware of every individual itch, every slightly wrong angle of his sitting position, every sound in the house and outside it. And then, around the sixth session, something shifted. He stopped fighting the awareness and let it expand. Instead of trying not to hear the sounds and feel the sensations, he let them all in, every footstep, every draft, every pressure signature of every person in the building, and then let them all exist simultaneously without demanding his reaction. It was like learning to look at a whole landscape instead of a single tree. Walter noticed immediately. There it is, he said quietly. What? You found the second layer. Walter's expression was the quiet one he wore when he was genuinely pleased. Most people who meditate are trying to empty themselves. What you've just done is the opposite. It feels fuller, Harry said. Not quieter. Yes. Because what you are doesn't work by absence. It works by presence, Harry said. Walter smiled. Precisely. The next week, Sarah's Victoria arrived back from a mission in Eastern Europe. Harry was in the kitchen when she came in, the kitchen being one of the few rooms in Hellsing Manor with reliable warmth and no agenda, eating toast and reading one of Walter's Latin texts. He heard the front door and the voices, heard Chen's report and a female voice responding, and then the kitchen door opened and Sarah's came in. She was tall, blonde, with enormous blue eyes and a face that was simultaneously cheerful and carrying about it the particular weight of someone who had seen difficult things and chosen to keep going anyway. She was wearing her Hellsing uniform, which was red, and she was carrying a kit bag over one shoulder and had dried something that wasn't mud on her left boot. She stopped when she saw Harry. Oh, she said. Hello. Hello, Harry said. She looked at him the way adults who hadn't been briefed looked at him, with the specific surprise of someone encountering a child in a place where children didn't belong, followed immediately by the recalibration of someone who had worked for Alucard long enough to know that unexpected things were simply the texture of normal. You're Harry, she said. You're Sarah's, he said. You're Alucard's other, he said fledgling. She made a face that was fond and tired in equal measure. He would use that word. She dropped her kit bag by the door and came to sit at the table across from him without being invited, in the way of someone who had claimed this kitchen long before he arrived and was comfortable in it. How long have you been here? 6 weeks and 4 days. What's it like? Harry thought about the honest answer to this. Strange, he said. Good strange. Walter makes me do mathematics. Walter makes everyone do mathematics, Sarah said, standing up to put the kettle on. It's his love language. How are you finding him? He's the most precise person I've ever met, Harry said. And he's kind in a way he doesn't advertise. Sarah's turned and looked at him with visible surprise. Then a wide smile. Yes, she said. Exactly that. She came back to the table. And Alucard? Harry looked down at his Latin text for a moment. He's teaching me what I am, he said. Or, teaching me to find out. He doesn't just tell me things, he makes me work them out. A pause. I think he's the first person who's ever thought it mattered what I worked out. Sarah's looked at him for a long moment with an expression that was doing something complicated. Then she put her hand briefly over his on the table, the unconscious contact of someone who had decided without a formal decision that this small person was her responsibility too. I'm going to teach you to cook, she said. Proper food. Walter feeds you like you're training for the military. I am training, Harry said. You can do both. Sarah slotted into Harry's days like she'd always been there, which Harry suspected was something she did, found the shape of a situation and filled the gap in it. She brought warmth to the manor in a way that was different from Walter's precise care or Alucard's oblique instruction or Integra's stern investment. She was simply there, loud when the house got too quiet, steady when Harry woke at 2 in the morning because the dark outside was pressing in and he couldn't quite settle. She sparred with him differently from Chen, less technical, more about reaction, about improvisation. She lost to him on purpose twice before Harry noticed, at which point he told her to stop. "I'm not going to get better if you—" I know, she said. "Old habit. I did the same thing I used to do it with kids in my old neighborhood." She squared up properly. "All right. No more gifts." She put him on the floor 4 times in the next 6 minutes. "Better," Harry said from the mat on the 4th occasion. "You nearly had me on the 3rd one," Sarah said, not without pride. The power kept building. That was the reality of the thing that nobody said directly but everyone in the manor was paying attention to. It wasn't a static quantity that could be trained and then contained. It grew. Every week the range of Harry's ambient awareness extended. Every week the pull of the dark was stronger when he reached for it, and the reach happened more instinctively. Alucard accelerated the lessons. He started bringing Harry down to his basement chambers. It was exactly what you'd expect of a room lived in by a 400-year-old vampire who had ceased to care about interior decoration sometime in the early 19th century, stone walls, deep dark, a coffin he never actually slept in because he didn't sleep so much as phase in and out of existence at the boundary between states. Old weapons on hooks. A stack of books that ranged from Ottoman military history to Victorian penny dreadfuls. A single chair. Harry sat cross-legged on the floor because there was only the one chair and Alucard wasn't using it. He was standing against the wall in the way he sometimes stood, as though the wall were a vertical floor. "What's the furthest you can feel?" Alucard asked. Harry closed his eyes. Breathed, really breathed, the way Walter had taught him, the expansion that started in the chest and kept going. "The gates," he said. "Both guards on duty. The ones at the east corner are asleep. No, one of them is, the other is pretending." He paused. The road outside. A car, going toward town. A dog in the garden 2 properties over. Further. Harry pushed. The awareness stretched, physically uncomfortable, like reaching a muscle past its comfortable extension. A village. "I can feel," he frowned. "People. Lots of people but distant, like what? Like stars. You know they're there but you're feeling light that already happened." He opened his eyes. "That's 3 miles. It was half a mile, 6 weeks ago," Alucard said. Harry stared at him. Is that supposed to be good?" "It's supposed to be remarkable," Alucard said, which was the closest he came to straightforward praise. "Now we are going to work on something different." He moved to stand directly in front of Harry and crouched down. His eyes, behind the orange glass, were fully red, the color they went when he stopped performing humanity. "The dark that came out of you in the training room," he said. "Where do you think it comes from?" "Me," Harry said. "From where in you?" Harry thought about it. "The same place I feel people," he said slowly. "The same place the awareness lives. It's like," he stopped. "Tried again. The awareness is me going outward. The dark is the outside coming inward and then back out again," Alucard said. "Yes. You understand. Is that what you do?" "What I do is different in magnitude. Not in kind." He looked at Harry with the direct attention he used when something mattered. "What I am is what happens when what you have is fully realized. When the potential architecture of a soul like yours completes itself." "Am I going to become a vampire?" "No," Alucard said. "What you'll become has no existing name. A no-life king is not a vampire, it's what remains when every limitation a living creature imposes on its own power is released. Vampirism was one path to that. It's not the only one. Harry was quiet for a moment. You said limits reveal you. Earlier. Weeks ago. I remember. So what is this revealing? Alucard's smile was slow and genuine. We're finding out, he said. Both of us. Then he raised one hand, palm up, and produced in it a perfect sphere of absolute darkness, not shadow, not darkness in the sense of absent light, but darkness as a substance, as a thing with density and intention, and held it out toward Harry. Take it, he said. Harry reached out. His fingers touched the sphere and it dissolved, not destroyed, absorbed, pulled into his palm the way water is pulled into dry earth, instantly, completely. He felt it settle somewhere inside his chest with the sensation of something slotting into a space that had been specifically shaped for it. Oh, he said. Yes, Alucard said. Harry opened his hand. In his palm, exactly where the sphere had been, his own darkness was already forming, different from Alucard's, he could tell even this early, a different frequency, a different texture. Alucard's darkness was old and deep and absolute. Harry's was younger and sharper, with an edge to it like the difference between deep ocean and the surface before a storm. He held it for 11 seconds before it dissolved on its own, and when it did the basement room temperature had dropped by 12 degrees. Tomorrow, Alucard said, we do it for 12 seconds. Integra found Harry on the grounds the following morning, sitting on the stone bench near the garden wall. He was doing the stillness exercise, but he'd moved it outside, and the air immediately around him was very slightly darker than it should have been, even in clear autumn sunlight. A faint shadow that existed without a source, clung to him like a second skin. She sat beside him on the bench. She was carrying her tea in one hand and looking at nothing specific on the horizon, the way she did when she had things to think through and found thinking easier in movement or in cold air. Does it feel like you? She asked, without preamble. Harry opened his eyes. Looked at the shadow around his hands. It feels like mine, he said. Which might be the same thing. Alucard tells me you're progressing faster than he anticipated. He told me not to get comfortable about it. Yes, Integra said. That sounds like him. She looked at the shadow around his hands. Are you afraid of it? No, Harry said. Have you ever been afraid of it? He thought about that honestly. I was afraid of losing control of it, he said. In the training room. After. I thought, he stopped. Started again. At the Dursleys, the things that happened around me when something went wrong, they always made things worse for me. The things I couldn't control always got me in trouble. And now. It's mine, he said again, simply. It's not something that happens to me. It's something I am. That's different. Integra looked at him for a moment with an expression she wouldn't have worn for any other person in the building. Then she drank her tea. People are going to come, she said. People who want things from you. Some of them will believe they're acting in your interest. Some of them will be right about that and wrong about everything else. She looked at him steadily. When they come, and they will, remember that your power is yours. Your choices are yours. Anyone who tells you differently is telling you something about what they want, not what is true. Harry looked back at her. You're talking about Dumbledore, he said. Integra was quiet for a moment. I'm talking about everyone, she said. But yes. Among others. Harry nodded slowly. The shadow around his hands deepened for just a moment, and then smoothed out, controlled and deliberate. Okay, he said. Good. She stood, smoothed her jacket, picked up her tea. Walter has a Latin exam for you at 10. I know all the ones he's going to ask. Then surprise him with the ones he isn't. She walked back to the house, and Harry sat on the bench in the November morning, and the shadow that was his shadow and no one else's breathed steadily around him, patient and awake and entirely, specifically his. Chapter 3, The Letter, The Visitor, The Answer. The owl arrived on a Thursday. Harry was in the middle of a sparring session with Sarah's when it came, not through a window but through the front door, which someone had apparently left open during a supply delivery, and it navigated the manor hallways with the impervious confidence of a creature that considered all architecture provisional. It found Harry in the training room, landed on the rack of practice weapons beside the door, and stared at him with the particular amber intensity of an owl that had been given very clear instructions and intended to carry them out. There was a letter attached to its leg. Green ink. Harry's name on the front in handwriting that looped and pressed with the weight of someone who wrote a great many important letters and knew it. Harry lowered his hands and looked at it. Sarah's had stopped mid-movement and was looking at the owl, then at Harry, then back at the owl with the expression of someone doing rapid calculations. "Is that," she started. "Hogwarts," Harry said. He crossed the room, untied the letter, and the owl departed with the same impervious certainty it had arrived with, apparently satisfied that the job was complete. Harry turned the envelope over. The seal on the back was purple wax, a crest with a lion and snake and eagle and badger arranged around a large letter H. He didn't open it immediately. He held it in both hands and looked at it for a long moment, and what moved across his face was not excitement or anxiety but something more complicated, the expression of someone encountering the thing they knew was coming and finding that knowing hadn't actually prepared them for the feeling of its arrival. "Harry," Sarah said. "I know," he said. He looked up at her. "Where's Alucard?" "Basement, probably." Or, she stopped, because Alucard was already in the doorway. He looked at the letter in Harry's hands. His expression communicated nothing specific, which with Alucard meant something specific. "It came," Harry said. "It did," Alucard said. "Did you know when it would?" "I had an approximate idea." "You didn't tell me." "You didn't need to know before it arrived." "Now it has arrived, and now you do know. The timeline has worked out perfectly." Harry looked at the letter. Then he broke the seal and read it. The letter was exactly what Hogwarts letters were, formal, congratulatory, listing required books and equipment and the date of September 1st and the instruction to write back no later than the 31st of July. There was a second sheet with the supply list. Robes, cauldron, wand, the standard texts. He read it once and then handed it to Sarah's without comment, and she read it and handed it to Alucard, who held it between two fingers and looked at it the way he looked at historical documents, as objects of interest rather than instruction. "Well," Harry said. "What happens now?" "Now," Alucard said, "we go tell Integra." Integra had clearly already been told. The owl had likely passed visible windows before finding Harry, because when they arrived in her study she had the look of someone who had spent the last 20 minutes preparing for a conversation they were looking forward to approximately the same amount as a second civil war. She was standing behind her desk. Walter was in the corner, which was his position when things were being decided rather than administered. The cigar in Integra's hand was lit but untouched, burning down untouched in the ashtray beside her. Harry put the letter on her desk. She glanced at it. "We expected this," she said. "Yes," Harry said. "The question is what you want to do about it." Harry sat down in the chair across from her desk. He'd stopped waiting to be invited to sit months ago, which Integra had noted without comment. "I want to go," he said. The room was quiet for a moment. "Tell me why," Integra said. Not a challenge. A genuine question, the kind she asked when she wanted to understand the reasoning rather than interrogate it. Harry thought about how to say it accurately. "Because it's mine too," he said. "The wizarding world. Whatever I am now, I'm still a wizard as well." Walter says the two things aren't exclusive, they're just layered. "And Voldemort is there somewhere, attached to someone at that school, and if I don't go then he doesn't see me, and if he doesn't see me he doesn't know what I've become, and that seems like," he paused, choosing the word carefully. "Wasteful." Walter made a quiet sound that might have been approval. Integra looked at Alucard. "Your assessment?" Alucard was leaning in the corner in his standard arrangement, arms crossed, hat low, perfectly at ease in the way that was never actually ease. "He's ready for the environment," he said. "Not because the environment is beneath him, but because no one in that environment can genuinely threaten him at this point, and knowing that changes how he'll navigate it. He won't be reactive. He won't be frightened into bad decisions. A pause. The experience will be useful. The contacts, some of them, will be useful. And there is the matter of the stone. The philosopher's stone, Integra said, to Harry. Alucard mentioned it, Harry said. Flamel's stone. They've moved it to Hogwarts. Dumbledore has set a series of protections around it, Walter said from the corner. Which suggests he expects someone to attempt to access it. He's using it as bait, Harry said. Or as a test. Or both. Integra looked at him steadily. Both is my read as well. She picked up the cigar, finally took a draw from it. Let out the smoke slowly. There is another matter. Dumbledore is going to come here, Harry said. Yes. Before September. Almost certainly. She leaned forward. He'll want to assess the situation. He'll want to assess you. He has invested a great deal in a particular vision of who you are and what you're meant to do, and everything he learns about these past months will tell him that vision requires revision. How he responds to that information is something we need to understand before you walk through the doors of his school. Is he dangerous? Harry asked. The question sat in the room for a moment. He is the most powerful wizard alive, Alucard said. He has political influence across 3 continents and a willingness to operate by his own moral accounting that he has mistaken, for so long, for wisdom that he can no longer tell the difference. A pause. He is not an enemy. He is something more complicated, which in some ways makes him more difficult to navigate than an enemy. He genuinely wants good things, Walter said. He's simply decided, over decades of getting them, that he knows best how to achieve them. And what does he want from me specifically? Harry asked. To use you as a weapon, Integra said bluntly. A specific weapon, aimed at a specific target, used in a specific way, at a specific time of his choosing. She held Harry's gaze. His intentions are not cruel. He would genuinely mourn if you were harmed. But he has designed a role for you and he will spend every interaction with you trying to ease you back into it. Harry looked at his hands for a moment. The shadow that lived under his skin was perfectly still, perfectly controlled, 3 months of practice making it a background presence rather than an ambient threat. He looked back up. Let him come, he said. Dumbledore arrived on a Saturday in late June. He came alone, which Harry hadn't expected, no owl, no warning, no formal request. He simply appeared at the Hellsing Manor gates at 2 in the afternoon, and the security system registered a magical signature of such density that 3 alarms went off simultaneously and 2 operatives reached for weapons before the cameras confirmed what they were looking at. An old man. Very tall, very thin, with a long white beard and half-moon spectacles and robes of deep blue that moved slightly in a wind that wasn't blowing. He stood at the gates and waited with the patience of someone who was entirely certain he would be let in. Harry watched him from the upstairs window. He'd known Dumbledore was coming today, he'd felt him approaching from half a mile out, that particular signature like warm complicated light, layered and deep. He'd gone to the window and watched him walk up the road toward the gates the way you watched something significant arrive, not anxious, just attentive. Alucard materialized beside him without sound. He's older than I expected, Harry said. He's 110, Alucard said. He doesn't look it. Wizards age slowly past a certain point. He looked down at Dumbledore at the gates. He's strong. You can feel it from here. Yes, Harry said. It's different from yours. Warmer. More, outward facing. Yours goes deep. His goes wide. Alucard glanced at him. That's an accurate read. He looks kind, Harry said. Then, after a moment, that's on purpose. Most things about Albus Dumbledore are on purpose, Alucard said. Including the ones that feel spontaneous. Harry watched Dumbledore adjust his spectacles and look up at the manor with an expression of polite interest, like a man on a countryside tour. Does he know you're here? He knows what I am. He'll have felt me the moment he came within range. Alucard's smile was a specific kind. He's choosing not to react. Also on purpose. He's composing himself. Yes. We should let him wait a bit longer, Harry said. Alucard looked at him. We should, he agreed. They let him in at 2:15. Integra received him in the formal sitting room, which was the most impressively hostile comfortable room in the manor, beautiful furniture, excellent light, every surface communicating old money and older authority, the kind of room designed to remind visitors that they were guests in someone else's world. Dumbledore walked in and looked at everything in it with genuine appreciation, which Harry, sitting in the chair beside the window, noted as either authenticity or very good performance. Dumbledore looked at Harry. Harry looked at Dumbledore. My dear boy, Dumbledore said, and his voice was warm and rich and exactly what his appearance promised. I have been looking for you. I know, Harry said. You sent letters to Privet Drive. A lot of them. A flicker in those blue eyes, not surprise, recalibration. He'd expected either more deference or more hostility. Calm acknowledgement was a third option he was adjusting to. Indeed I did. I was concerned when you couldn't be reached. How are you finding? He looked around the room. Your current arrangements. Better than the previous ones, Harry said. Dumbledore settled into the chair Integra indicated, opposite Harry, the geography of the room making their conversation central. Integra sat to one side. Walter stood near the door. Alucard was not visible, which was its own kind of presence in the room. I want to apologize, Dumbledore said, and the words landed with weight because he said them without preamble, without qualification. For the conditions at Privet Drive. I was aware they were not ideal, a cupboard, Harry said pleasantly. Yes, Dumbledore said. A pause in which something genuine crossed his face, something that was not performance, that cost him something to sit with. I made a calculation. The blood protections your mother's sacrifice created were strongest in a home where her blood dwelled. I prioritized your safety from Voldemort's followers over other considerations that I should have weighted more heavily. You chose the protections over me, Harry said. I chose one kind of protection at the expense of another, Dumbledore said carefully. I will not pretend it was the right choice. Harry looked at him for a moment. I believe you, he said. That you mean that? Something in Dumbledore's expression opened slightly. He'd expected more resistance, Harry could see it. But meaning it, Harry continued, doesn't mean we agree about what happens next. Dumbledore's expression resettled. He looked at Harry the way, Harry could tell now, he hadn't quite looked at anyone in a very long time. With genuine uncertainty. What do you think should happen next? He asked. I go to Hogwarts, Harry said. In September. On my terms. I receive the education, both the one Hogwarts offers and the one I'm receiving here, which continues. And I am not managed. He held the old man's gaze steadily. I don't come to your school as a piece on a board. I come as a student who has his own mind and his own power and his own understanding of what this situation requires. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. The half-moon spectacles caught the light. You've been told a great deal, he said, about my plans. I've been told you have them, Harry said. I've been told they concern me significantly. I don't know their details. But I can work most of them out. He paused. You want Voldemort gone. Permanently. And you believe the mechanism for that is connected to me. To what I carry from the night he tried to kill me. The room was very still. You're 10 years old, Dumbledore said, carefully. I'm aware, Harry said. You're 110. We're both working with the information we have. Something moved in Dumbledore's eyes, the look of a man who had spent decades being the most singular intelligence in any given room, encountering evidence that the room had changed while he wasn't looking. He took a slow breath. "May I ask," he said, "what you are becoming?" "I felt, several months ago, a significant release of power. An unusual signature." "Mine," Harry said simply. "I'm aware it was yours. I meant its nature." "We're still determining that," Harry said. "When there's a complete answer, I'll consider whether to share it." Dumbledore looked at him for a long, careful moment. Then he looked at Integra. "You've done something remarkable," he said. "With him?" "He's done something remarkable with himself," Integra said. "We've provided the environment." Dumbledore looked at his hands for a moment, old hands, mapped with decades, carrying the specific wear of someone who had done both terrible and extraordinary things with them. Then he looked back at Harry. "I want to be honest with you." "Good," Harry said. "I do have a plan. It involves you, and it involves Voldemort, and it involves a sacrifice that I have long believed was necessary. Inevitable." He stopped. "But I am old enough, and, I hope, honest enough, to recognize when a situation has exceeded the boundaries of my plan." He looked at Harry with those eyes that were exactly as complicated as everything else about him. "You are not what I expected. I don't say that as criticism." "I know," Harry said. "What are you?" Dumbledore said. "Not in Integra's strategic way or Alucard's oblique teaching way, in the genuine way of someone who had encountered a question they didn't already know the shape of." "Something new," Harry said. "Something old at the same time." He held the old man's gaze. "And entirely my own." The silence that followed was the comfortable kind, not standoff, not assessment, but the specific silence of two people arriving at the perimeter of an understanding and acknowledging it. Then Dumbledore smiled, and the smile was real. "I look forward to having you at Hogwarts, Harry," he said. "On your terms." Alucard materialized in the doorway after Dumbledore had gone, had walked back down the drive and departed with the same unruffled dignity he'd arrived with, leaving behind the faint trace of worn complicated magical signature that lingered in rooms where he'd been. "Well?" Integra said. "He's recalculating," Alucard said. "Significantly." "Will he accept the terms?" Walter asked. "He'll accept them as stated," Alucard said. "He'll continue working toward his own ends in parallel. He can't help it, it's structural to how he thinks." He looked at Harry. "But he'll do it differently now. He'll do it honestly, or close to it. He respects what he saw today." "Do you think he'll warn Quirrell?" Harry asked. Everyone in the room looked at him. "Quirrell," Harry repeated. "The defense teacher. The one Voldemort is attached to. Do you think Dumbledore knows?" He paused. "He might. He put the stone at Hogwarts specifically, and he told you, didn't he, Integra, in one of the reports, that he expected someone on the staff to make a move for it. If he already knows Quirrell is compromised, he's using the stone to contain the situation," Walter said slowly. "Controlling where Voldemort focuses his attention. While waiting for me to arrive," Harry said. "Because the original plan was for me to be involved regardless." He thought about it. "He might not know it's Quirrell specifically. But he knows something is in the school. And he let it stay because he wants to see what it does." Integra looked at Alucard. Alucard looked at Harry. "You worked that out," Alucard said. "Just now." "Most of it while you were waiting in the doorway," Harry said. "The Quirrell part I've been thinking about since you mentioned the stone 2 months ago." Alucard was quiet for a moment. "Sarah's," he said, without raising his voice, though Sarah's was in the next room. She appeared in the doorway. "What?" "Your assessment of the boy's strategic thinking." Sarah's looked at Harry. "Better than mine by a margin I find professionally embarrassing," she said. "Why?" "Confirmation," Alucard said, and his smile was the real one again. He looked at Harry with something that had moved past satisfaction into something older and warmer and harder to name. "We have 2 months," he said. "We use them well." "What are we focusing on?" Harry asked. "Your reach needs to extend inside enclosed spaces with high magical interference," Alucard said. "A school full of wizards will create significant ambient noise. You need to be able to read through it. And your combat responses," Sarah's added. "The power is there, but you still think before you use it." "Thinking is good," Walter said. "Thinking for 2 seconds in a fight is a lifetime," Sarah said, with the authority of someone who had learned this expensively. "Both," Harry said. "Fine. What else?" "Your wand," Integra said. "You'll need one. Not because you require it, your power doesn't channel through wood. But because you'll be in an environment where not having one reads as either incompetence or threat, and we want neither visible this early." "Where do I get a wand?" "Diagon Alley," Walter said. "I've prepared a list. The wand, the books, appropriate supplies. We'll go this week." A pause. "I'll be accompanying you. Can Sarah's come?" "I will be accompanying you as well," Sarah said, before Walter could answer. "Obviously." Diagon Alley was Harry's first real encounter with the wizarding world in practice rather than theory, and it was overwhelming in the specific way that dense human spaces were overwhelming when your awareness had been trained past normal range. The alley was packed, summer shopping season, the crowd a river of robes and noise and overlapping magical signatures that pushed against his awareness from every direction. He managed it. He walked through the crowd with Walter on one side and Sarah's on the other, and he breathed the way Walter had taught him, and he sorted the signals into their layers and stopped trying to process everything simultaneously. Within 10 minutes the crowd was background noise rather than assault. He was recognized twice. The first time was a witch in her 30s who stopped dead in the middle of the street, stared at his scar, and grabbed her companion's arm. Harry met her eyes briefly and kept walking. The second time was an elderly wizard who said, "Merlin's beard, is that?" and Harry was already past him. He registered the recognition without responding to it. It was information about what he was to these people, a symbol, a story, and information was useful. Madame Malkin's for robes. Flourish and blots for the books, though Harry also asked for 3 additional texts that weren't on the standard list, a comprehensive history of magical theory, a volume on the intersection of non-wand-based magical practice, and a book on ancient runic systems that Walter had recommended as useful for the Latin work they'd been doing. The assistant at Flourish and Blots looked slightly uncertain about the off-list books. "Are these for a particular course?" she asked. "Personal interest," Harry said. She looked at him, at the scar, at his composure, at the very large and precisely correct man standing behind him, and decided against further inquiry. Ollivander's was the last stop. The shop was narrow and dark and smelled of wood shavings and something older than wood, something that resonated at the edges of the frequency Harry had learned to listen on. He walked in and the bell above the door was still ringing when Ollivander appeared from between the shelves, moving with the silent specific speed of someone who knew every inch of their space. He was small, pale, with those large silver eyes that seemed to reflect more light than was available. He looked at Harry and stopped. Not at the scar. At Harry himself. "Harry Potter," he said quietly. "I wondered." "Mr. Ollivander," Harry said. "I see you've come for a wand. I need one for school. I understand you're the right person." Ollivander's eyes moved over him with an assessment that was not the recognition the witch in the street had given him, this was craftsman's evaluation, something reading the specific quality of what stood before it. His gaze snagged on Harry's hands. On the shadow that lived there, barely visible but present to eyes that knew what to look for. "Interesting," Ollivander said, very quietly. He measured Harry, wrist, arm, span of fingers, with a tape measure that operated independently while Ollivander was already moving through the shelves pulling boxes. He returned with 7. The first 3 produced nothing significant. The fourth, holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, Harry picked up and felt it immediately, a warmth, a recognition, the wand conducting what he carried the way a lightning rod conducts the sky. The wand tipped through red and gold sparks. Ollivander was very still. "Curious," he said. "Very curious." "What is?" Harry asked. "The phoenix whose feather is in that wand gave one other feather," Ollivander said, watching Harry with those silver eyes. "One other. The other feather is in the wand that gave you that scar." Harry looked at the wand in his hand. It sat there comfortably, conducting the secondary current of his wizard's magic without any indication of conflict with the deeper, darker thing running underneath it. 2 channels. Both his. "I'll take it," Harry said. "Yes," Ollivander said softly. "I rather think you will." He wrapped the wand but didn't hand it over immediately, holding it for a moment longer. "You are not what I expected," he said, the second person that summer to use those exact words. "People keep saying that," Harry said. "People keep meaning it," Ollivander said, and handed him the wand. The 2 months ran hard and fast. Alucard pushed the training into territory that left Harry exhausted in ways he hadn't been before, not the physical exhaustion of Chen's sessions, which his body had adapted to, but the deep cellular tiredness of a person whose fundamental nature was undergoing continuous revision. The reach extended. By late July he could feel through magical interference clearly, could sort the signatures of living things from each other at 100 meters with the specificity of picking out individual voices in a crowd. By mid-August he could hold his darkness in active form for 3 minutes without visible effort, and the form it took had become more controlled, less the explosion of the training room incident, more the precise and deliberate quality of something that knew its own shape. Alucard said nothing specific about how far along this was. He said, more. Sarah started losing their sparring sessions fairly. She pointed this out to Harry one evening with visible mixture of pride and competitive irritation. "You read my feints now," she said. "I feel them coming," Harry said. "Your pressure changes before you move." "That's deeply unfair," Sarah said. "You told me not to think." "I stopped thinking and started feeling." "I know, and I'm annoyed that it worked." She sat on the mat beside him. "Are you nervous?" "About September?" "No," Harry said. Then, more honestly, "I don't know what I don't know yet." "That's interesting rather than frightening." Sarah's looked at him. "You sound like him," she said. "Alucard. When you say things like that." Harry considered this. "Is that bad?" She picked the right word. "Apt," she said. "You're yours, though. Don't forget that. He can teach you everything he knows and you'll still do something completely new with it." "He says the same thing," Harry said. "Different words. We say the same thing because we mean the same thing." She leaned over and ruffled his hair, which Harry had given up protesting because it made no difference. "You're going to walk into that school and they're not going to know what to do with you." "Good," Harry said. The last night before September 1st, Alucard came to Harry's room. Harry was awake. He'd been awake for an hour, not with nerves but with the particular alertness that preceded significant change, the way the air changes before weather. He was sitting on the floor by the window in the dark, not running any exercise, just being still and present with the night and what it contained. Alucard sat in the chair by the desk. He didn't turn on any light. They were quiet for a while. "Tell me what you are," Alucard said eventually. This was a test Harry knew. Alucard asked it periodically, and the answer was supposed to change as Harry's understanding of himself changed. "A wizard," Harry said. "With power that goes under the magic, older than it, that draws from the dark the way normal wizards draw from, whatever wizards draw from. Intent and training and whatever Ollivander meant about the phoenix feather." He thought. "A potential no-life king, which means the architecture is there but the completion depends on how I develop. What that completion looks like for me specifically," he paused. "We don't know yet. Because I'm new. And Harry looked out the window at the dark grounds. And mine, he said. All of it is mine. Not Dumbledore's tool or the wizarding world's symbol or the answer to someone's prophecy. Mine. Alucard was quiet for a moment. One more thing, he said. What? The people at that school, Alucard said, are going to try to categorize you. They have systems for this. Houses, titles, blood status, all the machinery they've built to sort people into their appropriate slots. They will try to fit you into one of those slots, and when you don't fit, some of them will try harder, and some of them will be afraid, and some of them will try to use the fear to control you. I know, Harry said. Let them try, Alucard said. Every time someone tries to define you against your will, they reveal something about themselves. He stood. Use that. Harry looked up at him. In the dark of the room, Alucard was barely visible, outline and orange lenses and the particular texture of his presence. A being that had existed for 400 years and walked through every kind of darkness imaginable, who had crouched at the door of a cupboard in Surrey and seen something worth finding. Thank you, Harry said. Alucard didn't say anything to this immediately. Then, get some sleep. You said you don't sleep. I said I don't need to. You do. A pause. It will take more than 3 months to train that out of you. Harry almost smiled. How long? 20 years at minimum, Alucard said, and walked through the wall. Harry sat by the window for another few minutes, feeling the house around him, Walter's steady presence 2 floors up, still working, because Walter always was. Sarah's, in her room, actually asleep for once. Integra in her study, awake, thinking. Alucard below, in the basement, existing. His family. In the specific way that family means the people who chose you. He went to bed. In the morning he would board the Hogwarts Express. In the morning a school full of wizards would meet Harry Potter for the first time and find that the boy they'd been hearing about for 10 years was not the boy they expected. In the morning his story, his real story, the one he owned, would begin its next chapter. He fell asleep with the darkness around him like a held breath, like a tide at its furthest point, like something immense and patient and entirely ready. Chapter 4, The Sorting of Something Older. Platform 9 3/4 existed in the specific way that things existing between 2 other things existed, as though the world had made a small private exception and was hoping no one pressed it on the details. Harry stepped through the barrier between platforms 9 and 10 and the noise hit him first. Steam, voices, owls, trolleys, the particular organized chaos of several hundred people all trying to be somewhere simultaneously. He stood at the edge of it for a moment and sorted it. Layered it the way Walter had taught him. Let it become background. Sarah's was beside him with his trunk on a trolley, wearing muggle clothes and looking around with the alert assessment of someone who was technically off duty and technically not going to leave until she was satisfied. Walter had come as far as the barrier and stopped. He had, in his words, no interest in crowds that smelled of magical residue and sentiment, and had shaken Harry's hand with both of his, briefly, which was his version of an embrace. Integra had said goodbye at the manor that morning. She'd stood in the entrance hall while Harry came downstairs with his bag and looked at him for a moment with that expression she wore when she was thinking something she'd decided not to say, and then she'd straightened his collar, a small, precise gesture, entirely unnecessary, and told him that if anything at the school required her personal attention he was to send word immediately. Not Dumbledore's attention, she'd said. Mine. Understood, Harry had said. Alucard had been in the drive. He'd watched Harry come out of the front door and load his trunk and he'd said nothing through any of this, which was its own variety of communication. Harry had looked at him before getting into the car. I know, Alucard had said, before Harry could speak. You don't need reminders. I wasn't going to ask for any. I know that too. The real smile. Go find out what you are in the world. Now Harry stood on platform 9 3/4 with the Hogwarts Express sending steam across everything in great white clouds, and children ran past him with owls in cages and parents called instructions after them, and somewhere in the noise and the steam and the press of people a boy his age with red hair and a smudge on his nose was peering at the train like he was counting carriages. Harry clocked him automatically, the awareness identifying distinct presences. Red hair, large family, magical signature with that particular quality of someone who'd grown up surrounded by practiced magic, comfortable and warm and unpretentious. He seemed to be alone in the immediate sense, his family visible further down the platform, already engaged in their own departure logistics. The boy looked up and found Harry looking at him. He didn't look away. "Is that really a lightning bolt?" he asked. "Yes," Harry said. "Brilliant," the boy said, with complete sincerity. "I'm Ron. Ron Weasley." "Harry Potter," Harry said. Ron nodded like he'd been mostly sure and was glad to have confirmed it. "Are you going to find a compartment?" "I haven't got one yet, my brothers took over the one I found." "Yes," Harry said. "Come on." Ron came on without further discussion, which Harry noted approvingly. He didn't make a production of the famous person aspect or pepper Harry with the breathless questions Harry had been bracing for. He just picked up his trunk and followed, talking about his brothers as they walked, for older ones already at school, apparently, and the Weasley family's relationship with Hogwarts was sufficiently long-standing that Ron delivered information about it the way someone describes a slightly difficult relative they're fundamentally fond of. Harry listened, filed it, asked the occasional question that prompted Ron to talk further. By the time they found a compartment Ron had described every house at Hogwarts, explained Quidditch with the focused energy of someone who considered it the most important subject that could possibly be discussed, and mentioned both Dumbledore and you-know-who within 30 seconds of each other. "You can say Voldemort," Harry said. "It's just a name." Ron made the face people made. "Mum says not to." "He's not in a position to do much about it at the moment," Harry said. Ron looked at him sideways. "How do you know?" "Because I know what he is currently and what he isn't," Harry said. "He's not dead, but he's not in any condition to be bothered by someone using his name." He met Ron's eyes levelly. "Fear of a name is useful to the person who has the name. Don't give it to him." Ron thought about this with the honest concentration of someone actually processing the logic rather than performing consideration. "That makes sense," he said. "My dad says something similar. Less directly." "Your dad sounds reasonable." "He's brilliant," Ron said, simply and without caveat, which told Harry more about Ron Weasley than any biographical detail could. They were 2 hours out of London when the compartment door slid open and a girl with large bushy brown hair and a slightly urgent expression looked in. She was already in robes, which nobody else in the train was yet, which told Harry she'd put them on early because she wanted to be correct about something. "Have either of you seen a toad?" she asked. "A boy named Neville has lost one." "No," Ron said. She looked at Harry. Then she looked more carefully at Harry, and the urgency shifted register. "You're Harry Potter," she said. "Yes," Harry said. "I've read about you in modern magical history and the rise and fall of the dark arts and great wizarding events of the 20th century, she said. Though obviously most of what's written is speculative since no one's had direct access, she stopped herself. "Sorry. I'm Hermione Granger." "Harry," he said. "This is Ron." Hermione looked at Ron briefly and then back at Harry with the assessment of someone deciding whether a situation warranted extended engagement. She came in, sat down, and said, "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "What house do you want to be in?" Harry thought about it honestly. "Whichever one fits," he said. "I'm not concerned about it." Hermione looked at him like this was either the most suspicious or the most admirable answer she'd heard. "I've been reading about them all," she said. "I think Gryffindor sounds best, personally. My parents are Muggles, so I don't have a family history of any particular house. I'm going by criteria." She paused. "You really aren't nervous?" No, Harry said. Why not? He looked at her. She was watching him with genuine intellectual curiosity rather than the celebrity interest he'd been bracing against all day, which made her immediately more interesting than most people on this train. Because I already know what I am, he said. The sorting hat tells you which house fits your character. My character isn't going to be a surprise. Hermione absorbed this. That's either very confident or very arrogant, she said. There's a difference, Harry said. I know. I'm trying to work out which one this is. Ron was looking between them with the expression of someone watching a tennis match and not entirely sure which player they were backing. She's like this all the time, isn't she? He said to no one in particular. I prefer prepared to unprepared, Hermione said, without heat. I prefer honest to diplomatic, Harry said. So we should get along. Hermione looked at him for another moment. Then she almost smiled. Do you want to know the history of the Sorting Hat? She said. The actual history, not the song it sings. Yes, Harry said, and meant it. Hogwarts arrived in the dark, which was the correct time for it. The boats crossed the lake in that particular silence that large groups of people sometimes arrive at when collectively encountering something larger than their individual noise. Harry sat in his boat and looked at the castle, vast and lit and built into the mountain like it had grown there, towers and battlements and 1,000 windows, the magic of it so densely layered it was practically audible. He felt the wards. They hit his awareness like the prow of a ship hits water, substantial, ancient, designed to catch specific things and allow others. He felt them examine him as the boats moved through their perimeter. Felt them encounter what he was and hesitate. Not block. Hesitate. Then they let him through, which told him something about how the wards were written. They were designed to identify threat. And whatever they made of Harry Potter, their conclusion was apparently that threat wasn't the right word. He found that satisfying in a way that was difficult to explain. Professor McGonagall met them in the entrance hall. She was tall, severe, with square spectacles and the posture of someone who had maintained extremely high standards for so long that the standards had become load-bearing for her entire personality. She looked at the assembled first years with the expression of someone who had done this many times and still took it seriously. Her gaze moved across the group and landed on Harry. Her composure didn't break, but it recalibrated, a small, visible adjustment, like a compass encountering an unexpected magnetic field. She held his gaze for a moment, noted what was there, or what wasn't there, the anxiety and awe she was clearly expecting, and moved on. Harry noted that she moved on. He noted that she'd come back to it. He was right. After her speech about the 4 houses and the importance of house points and the general architecture of Hogwarts life, she swept back through the hall and came back to the entrance with a specific purpose. She was going to introduce herself to him individually. He could feel the intention in her approach the same way he felt everything, as forward pressure, as momentum with a direction. He met her eyes when she arrived. Saved her the adjustment of crouching to his level. Mr. Potter, she said. I am Professor McGonagall, head of Gryffindor House and your Transfiguration teacher. I understand you've been, otherwise occupied, these past months. I've been studying, Harry said. With whom? Several people, Harry said. I have a tutor for academic subjects and supplementary instruction in other areas. McGonagall's expression moved through several careful positions. I see. And are you prepared for the range of subjects you'll encounter here? I'm looking forward to them, Harry said, which was true. She looked at him for another moment with those sharp eyes. You're not what I expected, she said, the third person in his recent history to deploy this exact sentence. I keep hearing that, Harry said. I'm not sure what people expected. A frightened child, McGonagall said, with a directness that surprised him and, he suspected, surprised her in its delivery. Given what I knew of the circumstances. We expected, she stopped. A frightened child, Harry said, without any particular edge on it. Just acknowledgement. I understand. Something in her expression did the thing Integras did occasionally, that small, involuntary adjustment that happened when you encountered something that required revising a prior assessment. She straightened. "Welcome to Hogwarts, Mr. Potter," she said, and there was something genuine in it, below the formal register. "I'll be watching your progress with interest." "I'm sure you will," Harry said. "I'll try to make it interesting." The Great Hall was exactly as layered as Harry had expected. For long tables full of students, the enchanted ceiling showing a clear night sky with every star visible and a three-quarter moon rising, candles floating in their hundreds. The noise of it was immense, 1,000 overlapping conversations, laughter, the scrape of benches, the enormous ambient magical signature of so many wizards in one space. Harry walked in behind McGonagall with the first years and let his awareness do its work. He wasn't reaching, just receiving, the way he'd been trained. He felt the room settle into its layers, students, staff table at the far end, and there, at the center of the staff table, the particular warm complex signature he'd encountered at Hellsing Manor. Dumbledore looked up at exactly the moment Harry looked at him. Their eyes met across the length of the Great Hall and something passed between them that wasn't a communication so much as a mutual acknowledgement, two people who'd had the important conversation already and were now moving into the practical stage. Dumbledore inclined his head, very slightly. Harry did the same. He felt Quirrell at the same moment. The signature was wrong in the specific way that Harry had been told about and could now feel directly. A human presence with something underneath it, pressed close, intimate and invasive. The feeling of it was like finding something alive under a rock you hadn't expected to be occupied. He found Quirrell's position at the staff table, looked directly at him for exactly 1 second. Quirrell was already looking at Harry. And the thing underneath Quirrell, pressed into the back of Quirrell's skull like a parasite that had decided the host was adequate but not ideal, was focused on Harry with an intensity that was not the intensity of a defense teacher noting a student. It recognized him. Not Harry the child, not Harry the scar. It recognized the power, the same way a predator recognizes another predator, fundamental and immediate and not entirely comfortable with what it was sensing. Harry held Quirrell's gaze for that single second and then looked away. He felt Quirrell continue staring for a long time after. The sorting was first. The stool, the hat, the queue of first years making their way up through the hall. Harry watched without any particular engagement. Hermione went to Gryffindor, vibrating with contained excitement. Ron went to Gryffindor, visibly relieved. Neville Longbottom, who had found his toad and was holding it with the same cautious hope with which he seemed to hold most things, went to Gryffindor. A pale boy who tried to introduce himself on the boats and gave the impression of someone who'd rehearsed the interaction went to Slytherin. Draco Malfoy, who had looked at Harry with the specific entitlement of someone expecting to be recognized and found Harry's non-reactive gaze insufficiently worshipful. Then McGonagall said, "Potter, Harry," and the hall went completely silent. Not the gradual hush of people noticing something. The instantaneous silence of a collective held breath. Harry walked up the aisle between the tables with the particular quality of movement that 3 months of Chen's training produced, efficient, balanced, not performing anything. He sat on the stool. McGonagall placed the hat on his head. The hat was old. He felt its age immediately, centuries of accumulated experience, of thousands of individual minds examined and categorized, the dense sediment of human character mapped and filed and cross-referenced. He also felt it encounter what he was and do what the Hogwarts wards had done. Hesitate. Well, the hat said, inside his head. Its voice was dry and had the quality of very old leather, worn in, unsurprised by most things. This is genuinely unusual. So I've been told, Harry said silently. You've been trained not to broadcast your thoughts. By someone who is, oh, interesting. Yes. I can feel the signature on the teaching. That's an ancient quality. The hat seemed to rummage, the way a person sorts through a drawer looking for something specific. You have all 4 houses in some measure, which isn't uncommon. What's uncommon is that the depth of each is, it paused. You've been doing a great deal of work. Yes, Harry said. Gryffindor for the courage, not recklessness, actual courage, the kind that comes from having looked at what you are and decided not to flinch. Ravenclaw for the mind, very fine mind, very carefully developed. Hufflepuff for the loyalty, which you keep close but which is absolute for the people who've earned it. Slytherin for, another pause, this one different from the others. For the ambition. Not ambition in the grasping sense. Ambition in the sense of someone who understands what they're capable of and intends to realize it fully. That's the Slytherin quality in its cleanest form, and you have it. So which is it? Harry asked. I'm deciding, the hat said, a little tartly. I haven't had to think this hard since. It didn't finish the sentence. Instead it seemed to focus, to narrow, to identify something specific. The nature underneath the magic. That's the thing that tips it. That quality, that depth, that, a long pause. Do you know what a founder would have made of you? I have some idea, Harry said. Gryffindor herself would have wanted you, the hat said, and there was something in it that might have been admiration, dry and ancient. But you are not simply brave. You are something that has decided, consciously, completely, what it is and what it will not be changed into. That kind of certainty is rare in an 11-year-old child. A beat. In anyone, actually. Then where? Harry said. Where you've always been heading, the hat said. And then, aloud, in the voice that rang through the hall, Gryffindor. The Gryffindor table erupted. Harry took the hat off, handed it back to McGonagall with a nod, and walked to the Gryffindor table. Ron was already standing, waving. Hermione was applauding with the focused intensity she brought to everything. The other tables were applauding too, or most of them were. The Slytherin table was notably quiet, and Malfoy was watching with an expression that had traveled from surprise through calculation and arrived at a specific form of resentment that Harry recognized as the resentment of someone who had expected the world to follow a particular script and found it wasn't going to. Harry sat down next to Ron. Knew it, Ron said. Did you? Well, I was 90%, Ron admitted. Hermione said definitely Gryffindor, the other 10% was me worrying about what I'd do if, Ron, Harry said. Right, yeah, brilliant, welcome to Gryffindor. The feast materialized, and Harry ate, and around him the hall returned to its normal volume and moved on to new things, because that was what halls full of children did, they moved on. But at the staff table, Quirrell had not looked away. And at the center of the staff table, Dumbledore watched Harry eat with an expression that was composed and complex and doing precisely the same calibration it had been doing since June. Harry felt both of them and ate his dinner without acknowledging either, because managing what other people knew you noticed was its own form of power. The dormitory was fine. 6 beds, curtains, the communal chaos of 5 11-year-old boys in a shared space for the first time. Neville unpacked a cactus and apologized for it taking up table space. Ron immediately established which bed he wanted based on proximity to the window. A boy called Dean had a West Ham poster he was trying to figure out how to affix to the stone wall. Seamus Finnegan declared he was going to levitate his trunk, immediately levitated his trunk into the ceiling, and was helped to retrieve it by Harry, who did so without a wand, lifting it down from the stones with a casual reach of his power that he contained to the minimum necessary. Everyone stopped and looked at him. Wandless. Seamus said. It's a weight management technique, Harry said, which was not a real thing. Brilliant, Dean said. Ron was looking at Harry with a combination of impressed and something more alert. Ron Weasley, Harry had already established, was not as simple as he seemed, and the something more alert was the part where Ron was filing information and would bring it back up later when they were alone. He was right. Lights out, the room quiet with the specific quasi-quiet of people still awake but performing sleep. Ron's voice came from the next bed in a whisper. That wasn't a weight management technique. No, Harry agreed. Can you do that with any object? Within limits. What are the limits? I haven't found them all yet. A pause. Harry, Ron whispered. Yeah. What did you do this summer? Harry looked at the ceiling in the dark. Outside the window the Scottish sky was enormous and clear, the stars doing what stars do when there's no light pollution, existing in large numbers and with considerable conviction. "I found out what I am," Harry said. Another pause from Ron. Then, with the simple generous acceptance that was, Harry was already sure, Ron Weasley's most distinctive quality. "Is it good?" "Yes," Harry said. Right then, Ron said, and went to sleep. Classes started the following Monday and Harry moved through them with the specific advantage of someone who had been doing advanced work for 3 months and now found himself in a curriculum designed for beginners. He didn't grandstand. He did the work at the level the work required and let the competence be visible without making it a statement. Transfiguration first. McGonagall turned her desk into a pig and back, which the class received with appropriate astonishment, and then set them to working on match-to-needle transformation. Harry had his needle in under 2 minutes, not because the magic was trivial but because he understood exactly what he was asking it to do, the precise mental image, the intention without ambiguity. He spent the remaining time helping Neville, who was apologizing to both his match and the table. McGonagall came by, looked at Harry's needle, and picked it up. It was perfect. Not approximately right, exactly right, mirror perfect, with the proper taper and temper. She turned it over once. "See me after class," she said. "Is something wrong?" "Nothing at all," she said, and the corner of her mouth moved. After class she told him, directly, that his raw magical precision was the highest she'd assessed in a first year in 15 years. He thanked her and asked what the next 2 years of the Transfiguration curriculum looked like, because he wanted to know how far ahead to read. She gave him a look that had started as stern and arrived somewhere between impressed and faintly alarmed, and then gave him the textbooks. Potions was different. Snape's classroom was cold in the way dungeons are cold and cold in the way Snape was cold, a temperature that had nothing to do with stone and everything to do with the specific absence of warmth in the man's interactions with the world. Harry had felt his signature in the building, sharp and guarded and layered in a way that suggested a great deal going on underneath a deliberately minimal surface. Snape's introduction to the class was the opening chapter of what Harry recognized as a performance, the voice, the pacing, the particular pause before certain questions, designed to establish a specific hierarchy. Harry paid attention to the performance the way he paid attention to all performances, completely, analytically, without reacting to it. "Potter," Snape said, somewhere in the middle of a series of pointed questions aimed at the class. "What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" "Draught of living death," Harry said. "One of the most powerful sleeping potions known. Asphodel is a lily and wormwood is an artemisia. Combined in the correct proportions they produce a sopor effect so comprehensive that recovery without the antidote is essentially zero." The class was quiet. Snape looked at Harry with the expression of someone who had prepared a particular kind of trap and found the quarry had simply stepped over it. "Where," Snape said, "did you find that?" "Most Patendi potions," Harry said. Chapter 7. Also briefly in 1000 magical herbs and fungi, though that source is less specific about the mechanism. Snape's expression did the careful nothing that was very controlled something. And Bezoar? Stone found in the stomach of a goat. Antidote for most common poisons. The mechanism is still not fully understood, the leading theory involves absorption of the poison molecules rather than active counterchemistry, but the research is ongoing. Harry looked at Snape steadily. "I find the uncertainty of the mechanism more interesting than the practical application, actually. It suggests potions interact with chemistry and magic simultaneously in ways we haven't fully mapped." Snape looked at him for a long moment. The class was entirely silent. 10 points to Gryffindor, Snape said, as though the words cost him something physical. Later, in the hallway, Hermione appeared at Harry's side with the expression of someone who had been waiting to discuss something since the moment it happened. "How do you know all of that?" she said. "I read all the standard texts." "Not the standard texts," Harry said. "Additional texts. Walter, my tutor, has specific opinions about what constitutes a complete foundation. Can I have the reading list? Hermione said. Harry looked at her. Yes, he said. I'll write it out tonight. Hermione's satisfaction was the satisfaction of someone whose assessment of a situation had been confirmed. I thought you'd be worth knowing, she said, which was one of the more direct things anyone had said to Harry in recent memory. From the train. Likewise, Harry said. Ron thinks you're going to be a great Quidditch player, she added, with the tone of someone reporting information rather than endorsing it. Ron might be right, Harry said. Though that's fairly low on my current list of priorities. What's at the top of your current list? Harry thought about Quirrell at dinner, about the thing pressed into the back of his skull, about the mirror of Eriste waiting somewhere in the castle. Understanding the school, he said. All of it. The parts the teachers show us and the parts they don't. Hermione stopped walking. He was 2 steps ahead before he realized and turned. She was looking at him with the complete focused attention that was her most distinctive quality. The 3rd floor corridor, she said. Among other things, Harry said. But yes. Dumbledore said it was out of bounds and anyone who went there would face a painful death, she said. Which is exactly the kind of warning that is specifically designed to ensure curious people investigate it. Which is, Harry agreed, precisely the point. Hermione stared at him. You think it's intentional? I think very little about Albus Dumbledore is unintentional, Harry said. Don't you? She thought about it with genuine seriousness. Yes, she said, slowly. Yes, actually. Then the question isn't whether to avoid the corridor, Harry said. The question is what's in it, who it's for, and what it says about what Dumbledore thinks is going to happen this year. He started walking again. After a moment, Hermione fell into step beside him. I like the way you think, she said. You think the same way, Harry said. I do, she agreed, without false modesty. It's nice to have confirmation. 3 weeks in, Malfoy found his approach to Harry. Harry had been expecting it. He'd watched Malfoy navigate the first weeks of school with the specific frustration of someone whose social map was not corresponding to the territory. Harry wasn't reacting correctly to the Malfoy name, wasn't positioning himself in the hierarchy the way Malfoy's experience told him famous people should, and this was apparently intolerable. It happened in the corridor outside the library, which meant Malfoy had probably planned it. Library corridor had reduced foot traffic in the evenings, which meant witnesses were limited, which meant Malfoy had done the risk assessment. He came with Crabbe and Goyle, which Harry noted as the choice of someone who needed the comfort of visual backup without having the actual confidence to act alone. Potter, Malfoy said. I've been thinking. About the homework? Harry said. Malfoy's jaw tightened. About you, he said. I think you're wasted in Gryffindor. My family has connections, Draco, Harry said, pleasantly. Malfoy stopped. I'm going to be clear with you because I think clarity is kind, Harry said. I have no interest in your family's connections. I have no interest in the political architecture of Hogwarts houses or the social hierarchy of pureblood families. I'm not being rude, he looked at Malfoy steadily. I genuinely don't care about any of it, and the offer you're about to make would cost you more than it costs me because I'd decline it and then you'd have to decide how to respond to that in front of Crabbe and Goyle, which puts you in an awkward position. Malfoy stared at him. What I'd suggest, Harry continued, in the same even tone, is that we treat each other with basic courtesy and neither of us goes out of our way to make things difficult. You're clearly intelligent and you care about doing well here. So do I. That doesn't have to be a conflict. A long silence in the corridor. Crabbe and Goyle were looking at Malfoy for instruction and Malfoy had none to give because the script he prepared had been cleanly sidestepped and he was operating without text. You're strange, Potter, Malfoy said, finally. I know, Harry said. Good evening, Draco. He went into the library. Behind him, in the corridor, he heard Malfoy say something low and sharp to Crabbe and Goyle, but there was something in the tone of it that had shifted. The bravado had a confused quality now, the noise of someone who had expected to feel larger after an encounter and found themselves feeling simply uncertain. Harry found the table where Hermione and Ron were already established, Hermione with 4 books open in a semicircle, Ron with 1 book open and 3 chocolate frog cards he was comparing, and sat down. "Malfoy?" Ron said, reading Harry's expression. "We came to an understanding," Harry said. "Did he understand?" Ron asked, "or did you explain it to him?" "Both," Harry said. "I think he'll be fine. Eventually." Ron looked skeptical. Hermione looked up from her books. "His father is a known Death Eater," she said. "Unproven in the legal sense, but the research is fairly, I know," Harry said. "But Draco isn't his father. Not yet, anyway. And I'd rather not decide what someone is before they've had the chance to figure it out for themselves." Hermione looked at him. "That's either very kind or very naive." "I watched a man try to design my life for what he thought were good reasons," Harry said. "It made me careful about deciding I know what's best for other people." The library was quiet around them. Somewhere in the stacks a candle flickered. Outside, through the narrow window, the Scottish autumn was dark and full of weather. Ron nudged Harry's arm with his elbow, an uncomplicated contact that said nothing specific and meant a great deal. "'D'you want a chocolate frog?" he said. "I've got 2 Agrippa and a Ptolemy." "I need Dumbledore, if you get him, Ron," Hermione said. "What?" "It's a reasonable transaction, in the library." "We're not talking loudly." Harry opened his charms textbook and let the argument run its course beside him, warm and ordinary, and felt the castle around him, huge and old and full of things he hadn't explored yet, full of secrets and layers and the deep accumulated magic of 1,000 years. He felt Quirrell in the floors below, restless and purposeful. He felt Dumbledore above, steady and watchful. He felt the faint pull of something on the 3rd floor that was more than a corridor and less than it seemed. He felt all of it and sat in the library with his friends and read his charms textbook, and the darkness under his skin breathed steadily, patient and vast and ready, a tide waiting for its moon. Chapter 5, Blood and Legilimency. December arrived at Hogwarts the way it arrived everywhere in Scotland, with complete commitment. Snow came down in quantities that suggested the sky had been saving it up, the grounds disappeared under white, and the lake acquired a skin of ice at its edges that the giant squid occasionally disrupted from below in what Harry had decided was its version of commentary on the weather. He stood at the window of the Gryffindor common room at 6 in the morning and watched the snow fall and thought about Quirrell. It had been building since October. The thing inside Quirrell, underneath Quirrell, pressed into the architecture of a man who had gone looking for power and found something that consumed the finder, had been growing more active as the term progressed. Harry could feel it with increasing clarity. The signature was sharper now, more focused, turning toward the 3rd floor with the patient intensity of something that knew what it wanted and was simply working out the timing. He'd explored the 3rd floor in October. Done it quietly, alone, on a Wednesday at 2 in the morning when the castle was as close to empty as a castle ever got. The corridor, the locked door, the dog, 3 heads, each asleep in its own rhythm, the harp playing itself softly in the corner. Underneath, a trapdoor, a drop, and below that a series of protections that Dumbledore had apparently considered adequate. Harry had gone down far enough to map the layers. Snare, chess, potion logic, the mirror at the end. He'd come back up without touching anything, replaced everything as he'd found it, and filed the information. The mirror at the end was the interesting part. He'd felt it from the top of the drop, not the magic in the glass, though that was substantial, but the thing the mirror did to the people who stood in front of it. The way it reached into the chest and found the deepest unguarded want and held it up. That was not a conventional magical object. That was something that understood human psychology at a fundamental level. Dumbledore had put that at the end deliberately. Whatever the mirror showed Quirrell, showed the thing in Quirrell, it would be useless. You couldn't use the mirror to get the stone if you wanted to use it. He'd read that somewhere. Or worked it out. The distinction was becoming increasingly blurry. He'd told Hermione and Ron about the third floor on the same night he'd explored it, over breakfast, in the matter-of-fact tone he used when presenting information that required decisions. Hermione had gone through approximately 6 emotions in 4 seconds before arriving at the specific face she made when something she found intellectually fascinating was also something she was professionally obligated to find objectionable. "You went alone," she'd said. "Yes. At 2 in the morning. The timing was practical." "Harry, the dog is called Fluffy," he'd said, which had stopped her. "Hagrid's. I asked him about it afterward. He mentioned the harp, which was helpful context." Ron had accepted all of this with the equanimity of someone who had been recalibrating his expectations of Harry since approximately the first week of term. "What's under the trapdoor?" he'd asked. "Several things," Harry had said. "None of them immediately relevant unless Quirrell makes a move." "And when he does?" Hermione had asked. "I'll know before it happens," Harry had said. He'd been right about that. The question was timing. Standing at the window now, watching the snow, he felt the thing in Quirrell the way you feel a change in barometric pressure, not through conscious attention but through the awareness that had become, over these months, simply a part of how he existed in the world. It had settled into a low, purposeful hum all term. Recently it had been accelerating. It was accelerating now. Harry turned from the window and went to get dressed. Breakfast was the social event it always was, the hall filling gradually, the house tables generating their individual noise, the enchanted ceiling showing the grey December sky above. Harry ate and listened, which was something he did constantly and which most people had stopped noticing because he did it without the visible attention that would flag as surveillance. Ron arrived, hair catastrophic, putting marmalade on toast with the focus of someone operating at minimal cognitive capacity. He'd been up late playing chess with Seamus. "You're up early," Ron said. "I didn't sleep much," Harry said. Ron looked at him. Not the casual glance of someone noting a comment but the actual look of a person who had learned that when Harry mentioned not sleeping it was information rather than complaint. "Quirrell," he said, low. "Getting closer," Harry said. Ron set down his toast. His expression did the thing it did when he was taking something seriously, which was not the same face he wore for most things. "How close?" "I don't know yet. Days, maybe less." Harry picked up his orange juice. "Don't say anything to Hermione yet. She'll want to go straight to McGonagall." "Isn't going to McGonagall the sensible option?" "McGonagall would tell Dumbledore." "Dumbledore already knows." Ron was quiet for a moment. "He's letting it happen," he said. "He's managing it," Harry said. "There's a difference, though in this case the practical outcome is similar." He drank his juice. "I want to be there when Quirrell makes his move. Not to stop it for Dumbledore. For my own reasons." Ron considered his toast. "You want to talk to Voldemort?" "I want to look at him," Harry said. "And let him look at me." "That's a deeply mad thing to want," Ron said. "Probably. Right." Ron picked up his toast again. "Tell me before you go." "I'm coming." "Ron," not arguing about it, Ron said, simply and completely. "Tell me before you go." Harry looked at him. The loyalty was total and uncalculated and had been, from what Harry could observe, simply Ron's fundamental setting. He didn't extend it broadly but once it was given it didn't withdraw. Harry had never had that aimed at him before Hellsing Manor. He still wasn't entirely used to it. "Okay," Harry said. Hermione arrived, sat down, placed 3 books on the table, and poured herself pumpkin juice. She looked at both of them. "What?" she said. "Nothing," they said simultaneously. She looked at them with the expression she used when she had filed something for later investigation. Then she opened a book. The castle's rhythm changed on the 21st of December. Most of the students had gone home for Christmas. The train had left on the 20th, taking its noise and population with it, and Hogwarts in the Christmas absence was a different building, cavernous and quiet, the few remaining students' islands in the space of it. Harry had stayed. Ron had stayed, going home being, as he put it, a logistical challenge given the number of siblings. Hermione had gone, her parents had been insistent, and Harry had said go, and she'd gone with the expression of someone removing herself from a situation while simultaneously planning to receive a detailed account of everything that happened. He'd sent a letter to Hellsing Manor that morning. Not details, just one sentence, using the language he and Alucard had established before September. The tide is turning. Alucard would know what it meant. Alucard would come if Harry needed him to. Harry didn't intend to need him to. The shift happened on the 21st at 11:30 at night, which was very nearly midnight, which was the kind of timing that felt chosen. Harry was awake, sitting on the floor of the dormitory in the dark, and felt the thing in Quirrell suddenly orient itself completely toward the third floor. Every other consideration, the ambient noise of the castle, the sleeping presences of the remaining students, the background hum of the wards, all of it went silent in his awareness by comparison, because the thing under Quirrell's skin had gathered itself and moved. He got up. Put on his shoes. Stopped at Ron's bed. Ron was already awake. Felt you sit up, Ron said quietly, already sitting up himself. Is it time? Yes. Ron got up without further discussion and pulled on his dressing gown over his pajamas, which was the most Ron Weasley thing Harry had observed to date. They went. The castle at night was its truest version, stripped of the performative normality of daylight hours, the old stones simply themselves. Their footsteps were quiet. Harry moved through the dark with the ease of someone for whom darkness was not an impediment, and Ron followed a half-step behind with the specific determination of someone who had decided to be here and was committing to it. Third floor. The corridor. The door was already open. Harry stopped at the doorway and looked in. Fluffy was asleep, all three heads, breathing the slow deep rhythm of something deeply unconscious. The harp was playing itself, the same soft arpeggios he'd heard in October. The trapdoor was open. Ron looked at the dog. The dog looked enormous in the dark. That's Fluffy, he said. Yes. Ron measured something with his eyes. Big. The harp keeps him asleep, Harry said. Don't stop it playing. He crossed the room, careful and even, and dropped through the trapdoor. The fall was short and the landing was the devil's snare, the vine creature that grabbed at limbs and tightened with struggling. Harry went still immediately, completely still, and felt the vines hesitate against the lack of resistance. Then he reached, not with his hands but with the awareness, and found the core of the plant, the living signature of it, the pulse, and held it in his attention with the particular stillness that said I am not struggling and I will not struggle and you have nothing to tighten against. The vines released him. Ron dropped through a moment later and had 2 seconds of instinctive struggle before Harry said, "Stop moving," quietly, and Ron stopped, and the vines released him as well. "How did you do that?" Ron whispered. Later, Harry said. They moved forward. The winged keys were in their chamber. Harry had no broom, needed none, reached up with one hand and felt through the flock for the specific signature of the right key, the old iron one, the one that had been used most recently, and it came to his hand without being caught, simply came, the way things came when you asked correctly. Ron watched this without comment, which was friendship in its most practical form. The chess room was Ron's. Harry stood at the edge and watched the enormous chess pieces arranged in their positions and then looked at Ron, who was already looking at the board with the focused stillness he brought to nothing else in his life. Chess made Ron a different person, not the warm, slightly chaotic person of daily life but something precise and strategic and unsentimental. "Give me 2 minutes," Ron said. He took 4. It was still extraordinary. Harry watched him navigate the pieces through a sequence that was merciless in its efficiency, sacrificing a bishop and a rook and a knight with the cold arithmetic of someone who had decided that winning was the only morally correct outcome, and then the white king toppled and the pieces cleared. They walked through. The troll was already unconscious, which meant Quirrell had been through recently. Harry noted this and kept moving. The potion room. 7 bottles, a logic puzzle written in verse. Harry read it once and had it in 20 seconds. He drank the relevant bottle, the small one, forward, felt the cold of it move through him and did nothing because a chill this minor was not worth his attention, and moved through the black flame into the final chamber. The mirror of Eriste was there, on the far end of the room, filling that particular space with its gilt frame and the inscription running backward along the top. And standing in front of it was Quirrell. He had his back to the door. His turban was slightly askew. His posture was the posture of someone who had been standing in front of something for a while and was not getting what they expected from it. Harry walked in. Ron stopped at the entrance and Harry glanced back. Ron was pale but steady, with his wand out and the chess room expression still running, no panic, just assessment. Harry looked at him for a moment. "Stay there," Harry said, quietly. Ron looked like he wanted to argue. He looked at Harry's face and didn't. Harry walked across the room toward Quirrell. Quirrell turned around. His face was wrong in the way it had been wrong all term, but closer now it was visibly wrong, the eyes too still, the expression sitting slightly off register with the face that wore it, like a mask that didn't quite fit the underlying structure. The thing using Quirrell was using him completely. "Potter," Quirrell said, and the voice was his but the cadence wasn't. "I wondered if you'd come." "I wondered when you'd make your move," Harry said. He looked at the mirror. "You can't get it. You know you can't." Something moved in Quirrell's eyes. "The mirror shows the stone to someone who desires it but not to use it." The voice changed, more of the underlying quality showing through, the accent different, older. "But desires change." "Not quickly enough," Harry said. "Come here," Quirrell said. "No," Harry said. "You come here, or you don't move, and we talk." The quality of the room shifted. The thing inside Quirrell gathered itself. Harry felt it the same way he'd felt it all term, pressing, purposeful, contained by the shell of a human body it had outgrown, and felt it, now, turned toward him completely. It recognized him. Still. The recognition it had shown at the sorting feast, but more complete now, less filtered through Quirrell's confusion. The entity that had once been Tom Riddle looked at Harry Potter across the dim room and knew that it was looking at something it had not encountered before. "What are you?" Quirrell said. "Something new," Harry said. "You can feel that." A pause. "I felt it in September," the thing in Quirrell said. "You are changed. From what you were. The child I should have been able to kill, you couldn't kill me at 1 year old, Harry said pleasantly. That hasn't improved with time." The thing in Quirrell smiled with Quirrell's face in a way Quirrell's face was not designed for. "You're not afraid." "No." "Of me? Of what I am?" "You're a fragment," Harry said. "A piece of a person who made very specific choices about what he wanted to be and has spent the years since those choices living with the results. You're not at full strength. You're inhabiting a borrowed body that's deteriorating. And you're standing in front of a mirror that can't give you what you need because the mechanism specifically excludes intent." He held Quirrell's gaze. "I'm not afraid of any of that." The thing that was not Quirrell was very still. "Come and look in the mirror," it said. "Why?" "Because I want to see what you see." "Legilimency won't work," Harry said. "If that's the plan. It works on everyone." "Try," Harry said. The assault came hard and immediately, not the subtle probe he'd heard described but the battering ram quality of someone who had spent decades forcing their way into minds and had no patience for the delicate approach. Harry felt it hit his awareness like a wave hits stone. His mental architecture, shaped by months of Alucard's oblique instruction and Walter's structural teaching and his own deep, continuous work on understanding what he was, absorbed it. Not deflected. Absorbed. The way the Hellsing Manor wards had absorbed the signature of what Harry was and decided not a threat. The way fluffy spines had absorbed his stillness and released. He didn't fight the legilimency probe. He let it in, and it arrived in something that was not the ordinary architecture of a human mind, not the library-like structure of thoughts and memories, not the emotional landscape that most minds presented. It arrived in something that had depth. Real depth. The darkness under Harry's skin was not metaphorical, was not a power he carried, it was structural, it was him from the ground up, and when Voldemort's legilimency went into it, it went in the way a stone goes into very deep water. And kept going. For 3 seconds, Voldemort's presence was inside Harry's mind, and Harry felt it, the fragment, the piece, the remnant of something that had once been a brilliant and terrible person and had made itself into this, and he let it go in as far as it wanted, and then he breathed, the real breath, the one that started in the chest and kept expanding, and everything it brought with it came back out with the exhale. Not as attack. As presence. The thing inside Quirrell staggered. Quirrell grabbed his own head with both hands, the physical symptom of something at a completely different level being destabilized. His legs buckled. He went to one knee on the stone floor and made a sound that started as Quirrell and ended as something older and more desperate. Harry stood over him and looked at him, and his expression was not angry or triumphant, it was the steady, interested attention of someone observing a result they'd expected but not experienced before. "You went looking for what I am," Harry said, quietly. "And found it. Are you clearer now?" The thing in Quirrell looked up at him. Through the eyes of a man it had ruined. The face was wrong, the expression was wrong, but something in those eyes, something that was the original Voldemort, the foundational person beneath all the choices and the transfigurations of self, was looking at Harry with something he hadn't expected to see there. Fear. Not the performed fear that people used. Not the strategic fear of someone pretending to be less. The genuine, foundational fear of something that had spent its existence making other things afraid and was now, for possibly the first time in decades, on the receiving end of its own currency. "What are you?" it said again, but differently. Not the rhetorical challenge of the earlier question. An actual question. "I told you," Harry said. "Something new. What do you want?" The voice was deteriorating, Quirrell's physical form reacting to whatever the legilimency rebound had done to the connection between them. "The stone. Power. No," Harry said. "I don't want anything from you." A pause. "Then why are you here?" Harry looked at him for a moment. The mirror was behind Quirrell and he could see it from this angle, could see his own reflection in it. In the mirror, the version of Harry Potter that showed your deepest desire was, himself. Just himself, standing where he was standing, looking the way he looked. No additions. No different circumstances. He absorbed this information and set it aside for later. "I came to introduce myself," Harry said. "Properly. So there's no confusion going forward about what you're dealing with." He crouched down, bringing himself to Quirrell's level, meeting those eyes. "You should leave this school. Tonight. Before Dumbledore becomes aware of exactly where this is. You won't get the stone, not tonight, not any night, the mechanism won't allow it, and staying only costs you the host you have." He looked at Quirrell, who was Voldemort, steadily. "Leave. Regroup. Come back when you have a body and a plan that accounts for what I am. At least then it'll be interesting." The thing in Quirrell stared at him. "You're telling me to run," it said. "I'm telling you this situation has no profitable outcome for you," Harry said. "Running is the intelligent response. You were intelligent once. Use it." Harry stood up and stepped back, leaving the path to the door unobstructed. Quirrell got to his feet slowly, using the wall, and his body language was doing several things simultaneously, the physical damage of whatever the legilimency rebound had done, the outrage, and underneath both of those things, running very deep and very quiet, the genuine calculation of something that was old enough and had survived enough to recognize an assessment it trusted when it heard one. He walked to the door. Stopped. Didn't turn around. "We will meet again," the voice said. Flat and certain, not a threat, a statement. I'm counting on it, Harry said. Quirrell walked through the door and his footsteps went up the stone steps and faded. Ron let out a breath that he'd apparently been holding since Harry had told him to stay by the door, which was an impressive duration. He walked across the room to Harry with his wand at his side and his expression doing several things he wasn't trying to manage. He just left, Ron said. Yes. You told him to leave and he left. The situation analysis was accurate. He's not going to get the stone, he couldn't navigate the legilimency, and staying served no strategic purpose. Harry looked at the door. He's not stupid. He's just been running on ego and fixation long enough that sometimes they override the intelligence. Ron looked at him. Then he looked at the mirror. What did you see? In the mirror? Harry glanced at it. Myself. Ron's eyebrows went up. Just yourself? Just me. Standing where I was standing. He considered it. Walter would say that means my deepest desire is self-integration. Alucard would probably say it means I already have what I want. What do you say? Harry thought about the cupboard in Surrey. About the thin blanket and the pencil drawings on the inside of the door. About the child who had decided, at some point before memory was clear enough to identify exactly when, that he would not be made small by the people who wanted him small. I think it means I know who I am, he said. And that's not nothing. Ron looked at the mirror for a moment and his expression did the thing it did when he was thinking something he wasn't going to say unless asked. Harry didn't ask. Some things were private in a way that deserved to stay that way. We should go back, Ron said. Before Filch finds us. Then, do you think Dumbledore knows? What just happened? He'll know soon, Harry said. The wards monitor significant magical events. The legilimency rebound would have registered. He started toward the door. He'll want to talk tomorrow. Are you going to tell him everything? I'm going to tell him what he needs to know, Harry said. Which is most of it. The part one won't tell him is what I saw in the mirror. That part is mine. Ron nodded, understanding the distinction without requiring elaboration. They went back through the chambers. The potion bottle had refilled behind them, the magic resetting as designed. The chess pieces had reset. The keys were in their flock. Everything in its designated position, functioning as Dumbledore had intended, the whole structure doing exactly what it was built to do. Except the stone was exactly where it had been at the start of the night and Voldemort was gone with nothing. Harry walked back through the third-floor corridor with Fluffy breathing in three-part harmony behind the closed door and thought about the mirror and what it meant and what it didn't mean, and the darkness under his skin was settled and warm and entirely untroubled. Dumbledore was in his office when Harry knocked at 9 the next morning. The door opened before he touched it. The office was circular, full of silver instruments on every surface making small sounds and motions, portraits of previous headmasters sleeping or pretending to in their frames. Fawkes the Phoenix was on his perch, looking at Harry with the specific interest that birds with significant magical capacity directed at significant magical events. Dumbledore was at his desk. He looked, not older than usual, but as though he'd been awake for a while and was wearing it with the patience of someone accustomed to long nights. Sit down, Harry, he said. Harry sat. I believe, Dumbledore said, you had an eventful night. Professor Quirrell attempted to access the stone, Harry said. He was unsuccessful. He's left the school. Yes. Dumbledore's expression was the complicated one. He'll need medical attention that I suspect he won't seek in time. A pause that carried genuine weight. Quirrell was a vessel for something that has spent the better part of a decade looking for re-embodiment. I'm sorry that he was. He looked at Harry. You spoke with it. Yes. What did it say? Harry gave him the substance of it, the legilimency attempt, the offer, the final exchange. He told it accurately and without embellishment, in the manner of someone who had learned that useful intelligence was specific rather than dramatic. Dumbledore listened without interrupting. When Harry finished, the headmaster was quiet for a long moment, looking at something that wasn't in the room. "You told him to run," Dumbledore said, finally. "There was no productive outcome in the alternative," Harry said. "He stays, we have a fight that damages the school and Quirrell dies tonight instead of in a week. He leaves, we have the same eventual confrontation under better conditions, and I've told him clearly what to expect. Either way the confrontation comes." He paused. "I just chose the timeline and the location." Dumbledore looked at him. The half-moon glasses caught the morning light. "You chose the timeline," he said, slowly. "He needed to leave convinced it was his strategic decision," Harry said. "Which it was, actually. I wasn't being manipulative. The analysis was genuine. But framing a retreat as intelligence rather than defeat makes it easier for a very proud entity to take." He met Dumbledore's eyes. "He'll come back with a proper body and a revised understanding of what I am. When he does, he'll be more dangerous and also less likely to make moves based on incorrect information. On balance, I'd rather fight the accurate version." The office was very quiet except for the small sounds of the instruments and Fawkes ruffling his feathers. "You are," Dumbledore said, very carefully, "not what I expected." "I know," Harry said. "I had a plan," Dumbledore said. And then, unusually for a man who had been revising the statement for months, "The plan is wrong. Not in intent, in scope. In assumption." He took off his half-moon glasses and looked at them for a moment. "I assumed you would need protecting. I assumed the mechanism for defeating Voldemort would require a sacrifice on your part that I had arranged for, in advance, without asking you." The room was still. "Alucard told me," Harry said. "The broad shape. A piece of Voldemort inside me, a requirement at the end." "Yes." Dumbledore put his glasses back on. "Last night suggested to me that the calculus of that arrangement may not hold any longer. What you are, Harry, what you're becoming, I am not certain a Horcrux can persist in that architecture. The darkness you carry may not accommodate a foreign soul fragment the way a human soul would." He looked at Harry directly. "I don't know. I want to be honest that I don't know." "We find out," Harry said. "Eventually." "Yes." A pause. "Are you angry with me?" Harry thought about the honest answer. "You put me in a cupboard," he said. "For 10 years. For what you thought were good reasons." He looked at Dumbledore steadily. "I'm not angry because being angry at you specifically would require believing you had options you chose against. You had limited information, you made a calculation, the calculation was wrong, and you've said so." He paused. "What I want from you going forward is honesty. No arrangements without discussion. No designing endings without consulting the person whose ending is being designed." Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. Something moved in the blue eyes, something that was too old and too layered to be one simple emotion. "Agreed," he said, and he meant it. Harry could feel the quality of his intention and it was unqualified. Harry stood. "There's one more thing." "Yes." "Voldemort went into my mind last night. He won't have found what he expected, and the rebound will have cost him, but he now has a direct experience of my power. He'll use it. He'll spend whatever time he has before finding a body understanding what it means." "Yes," Dumbledore said. "I had the same thought." "So whatever timeline we were operating on," Harry said, "it's shorter now. He'll move faster." "I know." The old man looked at him. "What would you have me do?" "Keep teaching me," Harry said simply. "All the things you know that you haven't offered yet. Don't wait for the curriculum. Don't wait until I'm older or more prepared." He looked at Dumbledore with steady green eyes. "Treat me like what I am." Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. Then he smiled, the real smile, not the managed warmth but something underneath it, something genuinely moved. "I think," he said, "that is something I can do." The letter from Hellsing Manor arrived that evening, carried by an owl Harry recognized, one of the manor's working birds, dark and direct. He opened it in a common room while Ron ate his third mince pie of the afternoon and the Christmas decorations did their charmed flickering. One line. Alucard's handwriting, which looked like it had been learned in the 15th century and hadn't been significantly revised since. I felt the rebound from here. How was it? Harry wrote back. Educational. He ran. He'll be back with a body. Tell Integra we may be accelerating. He paused. Added one more line. The mirror showed me myself. Just me. I think you'll find that interesting. He sent the owl back. By the fire, Ron was trying to teach Hermione's cat to play chess by placing pieces in front of it and explaining the rules, with limited success. Harry watched this with something warm in his chest that he didn't have a word for. Hellsing Manor had given him many things, precise and powerful and necessary things, but this was different. This was two people arguing about whether a cat could conceptually grasp the en passant rule, and it was his, and nobody had designed it for him. He pulled out a book, the history of magical theory he'd bought in Diagon Alley, unmarked and densely written, and opened it to where he'd folded the page, and the fire crackled, and outside the Scottish winter did what Scottish winters did, and Harry Potter sat in the common room of his house and read and was entirely, unperformatively at ease. The darkness under his skin breathed with him. 2 days later an owl came from Integra. Short, precise, in her own handwriting rather than dictated. The mirror result is exactly what I'd expect. Alucard says he knew before you told him. He says you'll understand what that means. Harry read it twice. Then he did understand. The mirror showed what you wanted most in the world. What Harry wanted most was to be exactly what he was, not more powerful, not safer, not different. Himself, complete, as he already was. It meant he had no lack that could be exploited. No gap for manipulation to enter through. No want that something else could offer to fill. He put the letter in his trunk and went down to breakfast. Chapter 6, What Remains. January came in cold and certain, the way things come in when they've been waiting. The school returned from Christmas with its noise and its population and its collective resumption of the ordinary, and Harry moved back into it the way he moved into everything, present and attentive and not disrupted by the transition. Hermione arrived on the first day of term with 4 new books she'd been given over Christmas and immediate, focused questions about the 3rd floor, which Harry answered over breakfast in a tone that communicated the information without the theatrics she'd clearly been bracing for. He told her and Ron together, because that was how things worked now, the 3 of them as a unit, each bringing something different, the collaboration less a choice than a fact they'd arrived at organically. Hermione absorbed the 3rd floor account with the focused intensity of someone taking notes she didn't need to write down. Ron tracked the strategic elements with chess player precision. When Harry described the mirror, both of them went quiet in their own ways, Ron into the particular stillness of someone sitting with personal information, Hermione into the intellectual absorption of someone processing implications. He actually left, Hermione said, finally. You told Voldemort to leave and he left. The reasoning was sound, Harry said. That's not, Harry, that's not why I'm saying it. I'm saying it because no one in the literature on Voldemort, in any account, any first-hand record, describes him as someone who responds to sound reasoning. He responds to power and fear. He responded to both, Harry said. Hermione looked at him for a long moment. She was doing the thing she did when she was revising a framework, rebuilding the architecture of her understanding around new load-bearing information. You frightened him, she said. The legilimency rebound did most of the work, Harry said. But you let it in deliberately, she said. You let him into your mind knowing what the rebound would be. Yes. She stopped. That's not brave, that's something else. That's strategic in a way that, she stopped again, which was unusual for Hermione. You were never in danger, she said, arriving at it. Were you? Not actually. I was careful, Harry said. There's a difference. Most people would say walking into the room with Voldemort is the opposite of careful. Most people are working with different information, Harry said. Ron had been quiet through this, eating his toast with the focused calm of someone who had filed something important and was waiting for the right moment. He said, "Dumbledore. How was that conversation?" "Honest," Harry said. "Both ways." "He told you about the—" Ron glanced around the crowded hall, dropped his voice, "the thing. The thing about you carrying a piece of him." "Yes. And? We don't know yet if it's still there. Given what I am." Harry looked at his eggs. "He's going to help me find out." Hermione's expression was a very specific kind of controlled. She had opinions about the Horcrux situation. Harry had told them both the broad shape of Dumbledore's original plan in December, and Hermione's response to the concept of a planned sacrificial ending had been, in technical terms, incandescent. She had not forgiven Dumbledore for it, and she was containing this with visible effort. "If it is still there," she said carefully, "what happens?" "We find a way to remove it that doesn't require the original method," Harry said. "Dumbledore agrees that approach is off the table." "Does he?" Hermione's tone was doing several things at once. "He was honest about it. He said the plan was wrong." Harry looked at her. "I believe him." Hermione held his gaze for a moment. Then she exhaled. "All right," she said, which was Hermione for "I'll accept this but I'm maintaining my own assessment in parallel." Ron topped up his pumpkin juice and said, "So what happens now?" "Rest of the year, I mean." Harry thought about it. "We learn," he said. "Everything the school has to offer. We understand the castle, properly, all of it. And we wait for Voldemort to make his next move, which will come but not this year." "How do you know not this year?" "He needs a body. Growing a new body isn't quick." Harry looked at them both. "We have time." Ron nodded. Hermione opened a book. The great hall moved around them in its ordinary, complicated way. Dumbledore began meeting with Harry on Tuesday evenings. The first meeting established the format: no curriculum, no lesson plan, just Dumbledore teaching what he considered worth teaching and Harry asking what he considered worth asking, and the two of them arriving at whatever the session produced through conversation rather than structure. It was, Harry recognized, a teaching method that bore a distant family resemblance to Alucard's, filtered through a completely different personality. Where Alucard obliqued, Dumbledore stated. Where Alucard waited for you to find the thing yourself, Dumbledore gave you the thing and watched what you did with it. Different entrances into the same country. The first session was about Horcruxes, not the concept, but the mechanism. How they were made, what the act of making one did to the maker's soul, what that fracturing meant for stability and power over time. Dumbledore discussed this with the clinical precision of someone who had spent decades on the research and the subdued effect of someone who found the subject genuinely disturbing. Harry listened and thought about Voldemort in Quirrell's body, the fragment, the piece, the remnant, and understood the deterioration he'd felt in that encounter differently now. A piece of a soul that had been broken multiple times was not simply weakened. It was destabilized in a way that compounded with each fracture. The intelligence remained. The will remained. But the capacity for genuine strategy, for the kind of long-game thinking that required holding several considerations simultaneously without one consuming the others, was compromised. "He's more reactive than he was," Harry said, at one point. Dumbledore looked at him. "Yes. How did you perceive that?" "In the chamber. When the reasoning worked. A fully intact Voldemort would have, I think he would have stayed. Taken the damage from the rebound and stayed and tried again, because the intact version would have been confident enough in his own recovery to absorb a setback." Harry thought about it. The fragment version needed to run because it couldn't trust its own resilience. "That is," Dumbledore said, with the expression he wore when Harry said something that required revision of his prior assessment, "a more precise analysis than I arrived at after considerably more time." "You knew him personally," Harry said. "That makes it harder." Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. Yes, he said. It does. The meetings covered magic theory, magical history, the specific nature of the protections on the Philosopher's Stone and why certain of them had worked and certain hadn't, the mechanics of blood wards and why Lily Potter's sacrifice had generated them, and, in a session in late January, legilimency and occlumency. You've already demonstrated an unusual native occlumency, Dumbledore said. The structure of your mind resists intrusion by its nature rather than by practice. Alucard said it's because the depth of it makes standard legilimency counterproductive, Harry said. You go in looking for the surface of someone's thoughts. There's no surface to find. Essentially correct. Though I would add, he paused, choosing his words. A very skilled legilimens can work differently. Not looking for the surface but going deep deliberately. If Voldemort had that skill in full rather than the fragment version, would you like to try? Harry said. Dumbledore looked at him over his half-moon glasses. You're inviting me to attempt legilimency on you. Yes. So I know what full skill looks like from the inside. Harry held the old man's gaze. I'd rather have the experience here than encounter it as a surprise. A long pause. You're certain? Try it, Harry said. What followed was the most technically skilled thing Harry had felt directed at him, nothing like Voldemort's battering ram approach, nothing like the blunt force entry that had gone into his awareness and kept going. Dumbledore's legilimency was surgical, precise, finding the joins between thoughts the way a locksmith finds the mechanism of a lock, patient and nearly imperceptible. It found the depth. And stopped. Not because it bounced off. Because it encountered the architecture of what Harry was and recognized, as everything that went looking in there recognized eventually, that this was not a space with a comfortable bottom. The darkness went down and there was no purchase for the entry point. Dumbledore withdrew with the care of a surgeon completing a procedure. Remarkable, he said quietly. What does it feel like from your side? Harry asked. Like trying to read a page in a book that has more pages than books are supposed to have, Dumbledore said. You keep turning the page and finding more page. He looked at Harry. The legilimency has nowhere to fix itself. In an ordinary mind, even a very strong one with occlumency training, there are fixed points, emotions, specific memories, areas of certainty or fear that the legilimency can anchor to. Your mind has none of those exposed. Because I know what I am, Harry said, understanding it more precisely now. There's nothing hidden that needs protecting. So there are no defended points. Just depth. Just depth, Dumbledore agreed. He settled back in his chair with the expression of someone finding genuine intellectual pleasure in a problem. I have been alive for 110 years, he said. I have rarely been educated by a student. You educate me every week, Harry said. The exchange, Dumbledore said, is less equal than you're suggesting. February produced a development Harry hadn't anticipated. Neville Longbottom found him in the greenhouse. They hadn't had many direct conversations. Neville was quiet in a way that was different from Harry's quiet, the quietness of someone who had learned that drawing attention produced bad outcomes. He was competent in ways that his anxiety about being competent continually undermined, a frustrating loop that Harry had observed since September. He was also, Harry had noticed in a way he hadn't mentioned to anyone, carrying something. Not power in the conventional sense, nothing like what Harry felt in himself or Dumbledore or even some of the more senior students. But a quality. A mark. Something that had been impressed on him from outside, from a specific violent event, that resonated at a low frequency he recognized without being able to immediately name. Neville was in the greenhouse before Harry, tending to his mandrake with the focused care he brought to all plant-related tasks, when Harry came in for herbology prep. Harry, Neville said. Neville. Neville looked at his mandrake for a moment. Then, with the specific courage of someone who had been composing a conversation for a long time and had finally decided to have it, can I ask you something? Yes, Harry said. It's strange. Ask it anyway. Neville set down his trowel. He looked at Harry with brown eyes that were more direct than they usually allowed themselves to be. "What happened to me," he said carefully. "When I was a baby. I know what happened, everyone knows, my gran talks about it, but I don't, I can feel something sometimes. Something that's not quite mine. And I don't know what it is." He paused. "You know things. About, not ordinary things. I thought you might know what that is." Harry looked at Neville. He'd been waiting, in a low-priority way, to have this conversation, or a version of it. The quality he'd felt in Neville since September had always had the potential to be what he thought it was. "Tell me what it feels like," Harry said. Neville described it carefully, in the earnest specific language he used for things he found important. "A pressure," he said. "Like someone standing just behind him, but when he turned there was no one there. And sometimes in herbology, just in herbology, never anywhere else, which was strange, he felt genuinely, powerfully certain. Not his normal anxious competence. Something fuller. Like he knew what he was doing because he'd always known." Harry listened to all of it. "I think," he said, when Neville finished, "that the event that happened to you left an impression. Not a piece of someone else, just an impression. Like a scar." He thought about how to explain it accurately. "It gave you something. A sensitivity. A deepening in a particular direction, which for you is plants, living things, growing things." Neville stared at him. "A scar," he said. "A mark," Harry said. "Not a wound that hasn't healed. A mark that made you more than you were." Neville was quiet for a long moment, looking at his mandrake. Then, "Do you have one?" "Yes," Harry said. He pointed at his forehead, at the lightning bolt. "This one." Neville looked at the scar. "And it made you more too?" "In a very particular direction," Harry said. "Yes." Neville picked up his trowel. The expression on his face was doing something quietly enormous, the specific rearrangement of a person revising a story they've been told about themselves from a wound narrative into something else entirely. "Thanks," he said, and went back to his mandrake. Harry stayed a moment longer and thought about marks and depth and the directions that trauma took, depending on who was doing the experiencing, and whether the cupboard under the stairs was a wound or something older. He decided it was both and neither, which was approximately the same conclusion he reached every time. In March, Integra came to Hogwarts. She didn't announce it. Harry felt her arrive, the familiar control tension signature, the compressed spring quality of her presence, at the Hogwarts gates on a Wednesday afternoon, and he put down his charms work and told Ron he'd be back. "Where are you going?" Ron asked. "Someone I know is here," Harry said. She was at the gates when he got there, which took 4 minutes because the castle was large. She was wearing a long wool coat and her glasses and the expression she wore when she'd made a decision and was executing it without particularly requiring commentary. She was alone. Harry opened the gate from the inside. She walked through. "You didn't write," he said. "I don't write before visits," she said. "I visit." "Fair." He fell into step beside her as she looked at the castle with the evaluating gaze she brought to all buildings and institutions that she was deciding whether to trust. "What's wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," she said. "I wanted to see for myself." "See what?" "The environment. The people. Whether it's what you need it to be." She glanced at him sideways. "Whether you're all right." Harry didn't say anything for a moment because the answer was yes and he wanted to say it accurately rather than reflexively. "I'm better than all right," he said. "I'm exactly where I should be." She looked at him. Not the evaluating look, the other one, the one she kept brief and didn't discuss. "Good," she said. "Do you want to see the school?" "I want to see the lake," she said. "I've read about it." They walked to the lake. The February air was sharp and the water was slate gray under an overcast sky, the giant squid a distant dark shape somewhere in the middle. Integra stood at the edge with her hands in her coat pockets and looked at it with the focused attention she gave to large, ancient, ungovernable things. Alucard sends his regards, she said. Does he? He said, specifically, to tell you that the mirror result was exactly what he expected and that you should stop being modest about it. Harry almost smiled. He called it modesty. He called it unnecessary restraint. She paused. He also said, and I'm quoting directly because he made me memorize the phrasing, tell him the distance doesn't matter. The darkness doesn't diminish across it. Harry stood with that for a moment. The lake moved with the cold wind. He felt, distantly, the familiar depth of that awareness, the reach of it, the dark water feeling of his own power, and tested it, quietly, without effort. Extended it past the school grounds, past the village, past the hills. Somewhere south, at a distance that should have been functionally impossible, he felt a familiar presence. Old and deep and entirely itself. He let himself feel it for a moment. Then he pulled his awareness back. He's right, Harry said. The distance doesn't matter. Integra looked at him. Walter says your Latin is approaching the point where he's going to start you on Greek. He mentioned. He also says your mathematics is 2 years ahead and he's been having to find more advanced material. The puzzles stopped being difficult, Harry said. He was pleased about this, Integra said, in the tone of someone who found Walter's pleasure in educational achievement both genuine and slightly alarming. She was quiet for a moment. Dumbledore, she said. Is useful, Harry said. And honest. More honest than I expected. He came to see me, Integra said. Harry turned to look at her. Last month, she said. He came to the manor. Walter received him. I spoke with him for an hour. She looked at the lake. He came to apologize. Formally. For the conditions at Privet Drive. For the design of the plan without consultation. A pause. He also came to, I think the word is negotiate. He wanted an understanding about your training. About what Helsing's involvement means for the wizarding world's expectations of you. What did you tell him? I told him that you were not an asset to be managed by anyone, including us, and that Helsing's involvement with your development was between you and the people who cared about you, not a geopolitical arrangement. She glanced at him. He seemed to find this reasonable. He's getting better at reasonable, Harry said. Integra almost smiled. He said something that I found, unexpectedly honest. She paused. He said that he had spent 80 years thinking in terms of the greatest good for the greatest number, and that meeting you had reminded him that the greatest good was occasionally a specific person being allowed to become specifically themselves. She was quiet. He meant it. Harry stood with that for a moment. Then, he's going to keep planning, he said. He can't help it. But he'll plan differently. That's my assessment too, Integra said. She straightened her coat against the wind. There is one more thing. The Horcrux, Harry said. Yes. She looked at him directly. Alucard has been researching. Not in any library you'd have access to. In sources that require specific forms of access. She chose her words. He thinks Dumbledore is right that the power you carry may not accommodate the soul fragment the way a normal human soul would. But he also thinks the question of whether it's still present requires direct investigation, not theory. And what does direct investigation look like? Alucard wants to see you over Easter, she said. Specifically for that purpose. He has a method. What method? He said you'll understand what it is when he explains it, she said, which was entirely recognizable as Alucard declining to explain something in advance. He also said, she paused, and something moved in her expression that was more personal than her usual register. He said the examination will require you to go very deep into yourself. Deeper than you've been. And that you should know before you agree that it may be, she stopped. Frightening. Harry said. He said confronting, she said. He was precise about the word. Not painful. Confronting. Harry looked at the lake. The squid had moved closer, a dark mass gliding under the grey water, unhurried and enormous in its own element. Tell him yes, Harry said. Tell him I'll be there for Easter. Integra nodded. Then she looked at the castle again, at the towers and the lit windows, at the enormous peculiar edifice of 1,000 years of accumulated magical purpose. Do they know? She asked. Your friends. What you are. Harry thought about Ron, who had never once looked at him with fear. About Hermione, who catalogued his abilities with the focused interest of a scholar and complained when he wouldn't let her test things. About Neville in the greenhouse. They know enough, he said. They'll know more as it becomes relevant. And the ones who don't know? The ones who look at you and see the scar? They'll revise, Harry said. Integra looked at him. You're not concerned about it. I'm not performing for it, Harry said. What I am is visible when it's visible. If someone sees it and needs time to process it, that's fine. If someone sees it and makes a problem of it, he paused. I deal with it when it becomes a thing to deal with. And it hasn't yet. Harry thought about Malfoy in the corridor in October, whom he'd simply told the truth and who had been quieter, more watchful, more, Harry thought the right word was considering, since. Thought about Snape, who had recalibrated 3 times already and was now treating Harry's classes with a meticulous fairness that Harry suspected cost him something significant. Thought about McGonagall, who had taken to stopping by the Gryffindor table at dinner sometimes and mentioning things, a paper, a reference, an observation, in the way of someone who had decided a student was worth the investment. Not in a way I couldn't manage, he said. Integra looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something she didn't do with many people, she reached out and put a hand on his shoulder for a brief, direct moment, the same gesture she'd made adjusting his collar on September 1st. Good, she said. She stayed for another hour. Harry showed her the grounds, the edge of the forbidden forest, the Quidditch pitch from the stands. She assessed everything with professional thoroughness and clearly found most of it acceptable and some of it inexcusable from a security standpoint, which she communicated with the precision of someone who had strong feelings about perimeter management. At the gates she stopped and looked back at the castle one more time. Write more, she said. I write every week, Harry said. Write more often, she said, which was Integra for I like the letters. She walked through the gates. Harry watched her go until the road turned and she was gone, and then turned back to the castle. Easter came. Hellsing Manor in April was different from Hellsing Manor in autumn, the grounds doing the thing English grounds did when spring hit them seriously, the heavy grey winter releasing its hold on the trees and the lawn and the training yard with something that felt almost like relief. Harry arrived on the first day of the holiday and the house received him with the particular quality of a place that considered him one of its inhabitants, not as a guest, but as someone who belonged to the building's daily count. Walter had prepared tea and had 3 books on the study table that he wanted to discuss. Sarah's had been back from a mission in Portugal for exactly 2 days and had made a lamb stew that smelled like the kitchen was conducting its own separate celebration. Integra was in her study but came down for dinner with the air of someone who had been waiting for the household to be complete and was not going to admit this. Harry ate dinner with all of them and the table had the quality it always had, Walter's precision and Sarah's warmth and Integra's authority all running in their individual channels around the meal, all of them moving easily with each other's rhythms. Harry sat in the middle of it and felt the rightness of it with the specific clarity of someone who had once slept in a cupboard and could therefore fully appreciate the exact value of every element of the alternative. After dinner, Sarah's washed up. Walter read. Integra went back to work. Harry went downstairs. Alucard's chambers were the same as always, deep dark, old weapons, the temperature several degrees below the rest of the house. The coffin in the corner that nobody used. Alucard against the far wall and the posture of someone for whom standing and existing were the same activity. He looked at Harry when Harry came in. Harry looked at him. Something passed between them that was the thing it had always been, the recognition between 2 pieces of the same fundamental architecture, different ages and different magnitudes but the same depth, the same frequency. The thing Harry had felt the first night in the cupboard, when he'd looked at the strange creature crouching in his doorway and known before he could articulate it that this was something that recognized him. "You look different," Alucard said. 7 months of school, Harry said. "Not that." Alucard looked at him the way he looked at things he was reading properly. "Wider," he said. "The reach. I can feel it from here." "I can feel you too," Harry said. "I could feel you from the school grounds. You told Integra as much." Alucard's smile was the real one. "I wanted to see if you'd confirm it." "Confirmed," Harry said. He sat on the floor in his usual position, cross-legged, hands loose. "Tell me about the examination." Alucard moved to sit across from him, and the gesture was unusual enough that Harry paid attention to it, Alucard sitting, at the same level, in a way that communicated this as a conversation between equals rather than instruction. "You understand soul architecture," Alucard said. "We've covered the theory." "Yes. A Horcrux is a soul fragment forcibly embedded in an external vessel. The mechanism requires a particular kind of violence to create, not physical, specifically, though that's involved. Spiritual violence. The deliberate tearing of one's own soul." He looked at Harry. "When Voldemort used the killing curse on you as an infant, his soul was already so fractured that the rebound from the curse's failure caused another fragment to detach. And that fragment, finding the nearest available living anchor, embedded in you. That's the theory," Harry said. "Dumbledore thinks it may not still be there. Given what I am." "He may be right," Alucard said. "But theory isn't confirmation. What I want to do is, not legitimacy. Something deeper. I want to go into the architecture itself and look. With your permission and your cooperation." Harry looked at him. "What does that require?" "From you, complete stillness. The real stillness, not the surface version. Going all the way down into what you are and holding still there while I look." He paused. "It requires trust, Harry. More than you've needed to extend before." "I trust you," Harry said. "You've trusted me to teach you," Alucard said. "This is different. This is trusting me inside the deepest part of your actual being, in the place where your power lives, where you are most essentially yourself. That's a different level." Harry thought about it. Not because he doubted, he didn't doubt, but because Alucard had asked him to think about it seriously and serious questions deserved serious thought. "Will it hurt?" he said. "No. I said confronting. What you may find, in that depth, if the fragment is still there, if there is a piece of Voldemort's soul in your architecture, is that looking at it directly from the inside is significant. Psychologically significant." He held Harry's gaze. "Most people never look at themselves that clearly. It produces reactions." "What kind of reactions?" "Different for everyone." A pause. "I cried the first time I did it," Alucard said. "Which is information I am not providing for sympathy. I'm providing it so you know the magnitude." Harry held the fact of this for a moment. Alucard, who had watched empires fall, who was the oldest most complete thing Harry had ever felt, offering this piece of his own private history as calibration. The weight of the offering. "Okay," Harry said. "Let's do it." What followed was not like any of the exercises Harry had done before, not the stillness training, not the push of awareness across distance, not the cold breath of moving shadow or the controlled darkness in his palm. Those were all external in the sense that they moved outward or received inward. This was purely inward, a descent, Alucard's presence going in alongside his own awareness rather than meeting it from outside. He went down. The depth of what he was, experienced from the inside, was not what he'd expected even knowing the theory. It was not like the water metaphor he'd always used, the deep lake, the weight of depth. It was more like the moment before dawn, a specific quality of dark that was not the dark of absence but the dark of potential, of everything that existed before definition. It was warm in that old paradoxical way that total darkness has its own kind of warmth. He went further. He felt Alucard with him, the older, deeper version of the same architecture, a guide who knew this country by its oldest roads. And there, at a level below the level he'd ever consciously reached, he found it. Something that was not him. Small. Old. Pressed into the structure of his being the way you'd press a stone into wet clay, it had been there long enough that the clay had dried around it, had shaped itself to the stone's presence. But the stone was still not clay. The fragment was still not Harry. He looked at it. It looked back, not with awareness, not with the intelligence of its originator, just with the specific quality of what it was. A piece of a person who had been brilliant and terrified and had made choices that had consumed the brilliance trying to prevent the terror. The loneliness of it was enormous. Not Voldemort's loneliness as it was now. The original loneliness. The foundational loneliness of a child who had been alone first. Harry sat with this for a long time. Then he said, not to anyone specifically, not with words, "You don't belong here." Not angry. Not violent. Just accurate. The fragment had no consciousness to respond. But the architecture around it, Harry's architecture, his depth, the vast dark country of what he was, had been listening. The stone dissolved. Not expelled, not destroyed by force, simply absorbed and unmade, the way Alucard's darkness had dissolved into his palm that first night in the basement, that same perfect acceptance that turned a foreign substance back into the fundamental material. The fragment came apart into its component elements and those elements dissipated in the depth of Harry like a word spoken into a very large space, losing its definition into the air. Harry came back up. His face was wet. He sat on the floor of Alucard's chambers in the dark and breathed, and his face was wet, and he didn't wipe it immediately because he was still finding the edges of himself after the depth. Alucard sat across from him and said nothing. This was correct. He'd said what needed to be said before. Eventually Harry wiped his face and breathed properly and found the present, the stone floor, the dark, the cool, Alucard's ancient familiar presence. "It's gone," he said. "Yes," Alucard said. It wasn't dangerous anymore. It was just, there. Small. Most things that seem enormous from outside are small when you face them directly, Alucard said. I felt what it started as, Harry said. The original person. Before everything. Tom Riddle. He was frightened, Harry said. That was the foundation of all of it. Just terrified of being nothing, of being ordinary, of being alone. He looked at his hands. The darkness around them was quiet and steady. He made himself into a monster to avoid being afraid. Yes, Alucard said. And it didn't work. Fear doesn't leave because you become something fearsome, Alucard said. It waits. Harry was quiet for a moment. Is that what happened to you? Before. Alucard looked at him. This question had weight, the weight of history and choice and the specific gravity of 400 years of a particular kind of existence. Yes, Alucard said. Different context. Same mechanism. He held Harry's gaze. The difference is what you do when you find the thing waiting for you. You went in to look at it, Harry said. Like tonight. Eventually, Alucard said. It took me considerably longer than 7 months and 11 years. Harry almost smiled. You had worse teachers. Alucard made a sound that was not quite a laugh but in that direction. I had no teachers at all, he said. I had enemies and allies and a great deal of time. They sat in the comfortable dark for a while. He's going to come back, Harry said. Voldemort. Properly. With a body. Yes. And when he does, Alucard said, he will encounter you with accurate information about what you are. Which you gave him yourself, in December. He looked at Harry with those red eyes, the oldest eyes Harry knew. That was deliberate. Of course, Harry said. You wanted him afraid before he was capable, Alucard said. I wanted him calibrated, Harry said. Fear was a side effect. He paused. He's going to come back with a body and a revised plan and the specific motivation of someone who has been afraid of something and wants to resolve that fear. He'll be more dangerous. Yes. And we'll be further along, Harry said. Both of us. Both of us, Alucard agreed. The last day of Easter, Harry went to the garden. The same bench where Integra had sat with him in November. The stone wall, the grounds, the English spring doing its careful, tentative thing with green on everything. He sat there in the afternoon sun and felt the house behind him, Walter in the study, Sarah's in the kitchen arguing with a recipe, Integra on a call in her office. All of them present in their own frequency, clear and specific in his. He thought about September 1st, standing on the platform with his 3 books and his 2 big trainers. About the Sorting Hats crisis and the Great Hall going silent and Quirrell's wrong eyes finding him across the room. About Ron asleep in 3 seconds flat and Hermione's reading list request and Neville's Mandrake in Dumbledore's office and the mirror showing him nothing but himself. He thought about the fragment, small and old and finally released. He was 11 years old. He had a shadow that breathed with him like a second heart. He could feel living things at 3 miles and dead ones at further than that. He'd looked Voldemort in the face in a basement chamber and sent him home. He'd gone into the deepest part of himself and found and released the one thing that had been put there without his permission. He was 11 years old and the world had approximately 0 categories for what he was. He found this entirely satisfactory. He reached, not searching, just extending, and felt the school, 200 miles north, with its 1,000 inhabitants and its enchanted ceiling and its 1,000 years of accumulated magical weight. Felt Ron in the Weasley house somewhere to the west, the warm uncomplicated signature of him. Felt Hermione in her parents' house, the busy, structured quality of her mind at work. Felt Neville in the Longbottom estate with its extensive gardens, moving through the greenhouse spaces with the quiet certainty Harry had named for him. Felt the castle waiting. Patient and vast and full of the rest of the year, and the years after that. He pulled his awareness back and sat on the bench in the spring afternoon and breathed, and the darkness breathed with him, and the reach of it was enormous and entirely comfortable, a tide that knew its own shores. The kitchen window opened and Sarah said, "Harry, come taste this," in a tone that suggested the recipe argument was ongoing and she wanted independent verification. Harry got up off the bench and went inside. That night, after dinner, Alucard stood in the doorway of Harry's room. He didn't come in, didn't need to, was simply present in the frame of it with the orange lenses and the red coat and the ancient quality of something that had been in the world so long it had become part of its texture. "You leave tomorrow," he said. "Yes. 2 more months of school. Then summer here." "Yes. And next year." "Next year," Harry said. "And whatever comes with it." Alucard looked at him for a moment with the specific quality of attention he gave very few things, complete, genuine, unperformed. Then he said, "Stand up." Harry stood. Alucard crossed the room and stood in front of him, and the quality of the air in the room changed the way it always changed when Alucard stopped the performance and simply existed, the pressure drop, the depth of it, everything else becoming background. "Hold out your hand," Alucard said. Harry held out his right hand, palm up. Alucard placed something in it. A coin. Old, not antique old, genuinely old, the face worn almost smooth, the metal a dark silver that had absorbed centuries of contact. On one face, just barely legible, a word in a language Harry recognized as older than Latin, which Walter had started introducing him to in February. The word meant threshold. "The no-life king carries a seal," Alucard said. "A mark of what they are and what they hold. This is mine." He looked at Harry steadily. "I'm not giving it to you, it belongs to me and it returns to me. I'm showing it to you because when the time comes, you'll make your own. And this is what it will feel like to hold it." Harry looked at the coin in his palm. It was warm, which it shouldn't have been. It resonated at the same frequency as the deepest part of his awareness, the same dark water country, the same threshold quality. He held it for a long moment. "When is the time?" he said. "When you're ready," Alucard said. "Which will not be when you feel ready. It will be when you stop asking the question." Harry looked at the coin. Looked at Alucard. He handed it back. "I'm not asking the question," he said. Alucard looked at him for a moment that had length and weight and the specific texture of a significant thing being recognized. Then he took the coin back and pocketed it. "No," he said. "You're not." He stepped back toward the door. "Sleep. You keep telling me to sleep," Harry said. "You keep needing to," Alucard said. "We'll work on it." He walked through the door, not opened, through, and the room was itself again, ordinary in the dark, the spring night outside the window full of sound. Harry stood at the edge of the lake at the back of his mind, where the darkness lived and breathed, and felt the shore of it, vast and patient and old in the way that his was old now, not many years but deep ones, years that had done their work thoroughly and without waste. He stood there and the darkness stood with him. He was not afraid of it. He was not afraid of anything. He turned off the light and went to sleep.